Morning, everyone. This is the Wednesday, May 5th, 2021 morning session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, good morning. Could you please call the roll?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Maps.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically, obviously. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and channel 30, but you knew that because you're already watching. The public can also provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, flexibility, and understanding as we continue to manage through this challenging situation to conduct the city's business. Now we're going to hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of the testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
All right, thank you. First up is communications. Looks like we have 5 folks signed up today. Keelan, can you go ahead and read item number 295, the first individual?
Request of Anna Wilson to address council regarding Zenith Energy.
Good morning. And are you unmuted?
We are getting Anna connected right now.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Morning.
My name is Anna Wilson, and I'm here on behalf of Portland Youth Climate Council to ask that the city ensure the safety of Portland and the future of its youth. The February 2021 UN report states, "We are in a make or break year to confront the global climate emergency, and this is the red alert for the planet. This calls for our city to take action now by denying Zenith Energy the land use compatibility statement needed for their Title V air permit. Allowing Zenith Energy to continue to transport oil trains through our city and export oil in our already poisoned river is going in the opposite direction of our climate goals and puts our future at risk. In fact, we can choose from 2 possible futures and choose which one you want your children to live in. Extreme storms in the winter and droughts for the rest of the year. A city devoid of trees because having a tree in your backyard is a fire hazard. Burnt forests all around, the sky choked with smoke. People walking around wearing gas masks. Massive tanks and water to prepare for the shortages that happen every month or so. A river polluted, fish dying, sick people. And Zenith oil trains spewing chemicals and pollution through our city. Or rainy springs, snow in the mountains, and smoke-free air. Healthy green trees in every neighborhood. Solar panels, wind energy, and lush green forests. children playing in parks as electric cars and buses drive through the streets. Healthy salmon in our rivers no longer endangered. More green jobs and a clean, safe place to live for everyone. And no Zenith oil trains spewing chemicals and pollution through our city. Clearly, I'm being extreme in my portrayal of these two scenarios, but each decision you make here at City Council takes us one step closer to one of these two futures. Mayor Wheeler, I heard you say at Council 2 weeks ago that your commitment to limiting oil train traffic has not wavered at all, and that we should not have volatile oil trains coming through our community. Well, right now, the city has a clear path to stop Zenith. The city should follow the principles and policies laid out in Portland's 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the Climate Emergency Declaration, and Fossil Fuel Infrastructure Ban, and deny Zenith the Lex need for the air quality permit. I am only 15 years old, but I've spent more than half of my life worrying about the climate and being fearful for what's to come. City officials have made a lot of promises about a sustainable future, but that began yesterday. Youth want more than a promise. We want to know that the city has our back. If you truly believe in a sustainable future, you must use the power that you currently have to block Zenith's air quality permit. Thank you.
Thank you. I already forgotten to unmute myself. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your testimony with the City Council. And I assure you, the entirety of the City Council is hearing your testimony with great interest, including the commissioners in charge of the permitting process. So thank you for being here today.
Mayor, if I may.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, Anna, you stopped me when you said you're 15 and you've spent half your life fearful of what's happening to our climate. That just stopped me in my tracks, and I just want you to know that I hear you, and I am so grateful that the generation that's going to have these seats in the future are really clear about where their priorities are and how we can collectively create a better planet for everybody. And so I just couldn't imagine being 7, 8 years old and worried about whether or not the planet's going to survive until I'm 21. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. That means a lot to hear.
Thank you. Keelan, next individual item 296, please.
Request of Sarah Taylor to address council regarding large number of oil trains parked in Linnton.
Welcome, Sarah. Sarah, are you unmuted?
Yeah. Now, can you hear me?
Yep, you sound great. Good morning.
Okay. Well, I'm actually here for the Braided River campaign, although I do live in Linnton. And the Braided River campaign believes that, you know, the city council can have it all. We know you're working hard, and we believe that the lower Willamette River can actually have good jobs and clean rivers and air. And what I know about the area, because I live in Linnton, is that Zenith and other infrastructures are putting Forest Park at danger. So you have great assets in the city, which are Forest Park. You have the river and you have your children. And what's going on along the lower Willamette from the Broadway Bridge to Sobeys Island, I feel is dangerous to the forest, to the river, and to children. So I would encourage you to look at zoning, and in particular the EOA, separate out fossil fuels, decide how much you need, and zone them separately. I would also zone next to Forest Park to prevent forest fires. So those are my zoning suggestions. Also, I want to talk briefly, kind of a history nut. And I have driven up and down Front Avenue many, many times trying to study what is going on there. And what I've come to understand is that industrial zoning in Portland was a form of redlining. What happened was people's homes were made industrial. They lost value, they were forced to move, and they faced extreme danger. Right across the street from Zenith, I don't know whether you know it or not, but that was a large African-American community that was displaced. There were houses, there were businesses, schools, a firehouse. Every drop of that was removed. And we have a business that's not from Portland. And we have other businesses down there who are not from Portland. And I have read the state land use laws, and there's nothing that Tom McCall said that said, goal number 9 supersedes the health of the city or the forest or the river. So I would really encourage you to stop sacrificial zoning. I live in North Portland, and I consider Linnton North Portland. And in North Portland, there are the sewer, there is our garbage, there is the oil trains, there is the oil storage. You have put everything in one part of the city. And I would just give a strong message to the planning board to say that this is not necessary. So Zenith is just one more thing along with the sewer and the garbage and the trains. So I would just encourage you to stop sacrificial zoning, stop redlining people who are living in industrial areas, and have a bold new vision for the Lower Willamette. Okay, that's probably enough.
All right, hey, thank you, appreciate it. And you were right on time. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective with us today. Yeah.
Well, we're going to be around a while, so we'll probably be sharing more. Thank you.
That's great. We'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Next individual, please. Keelan, item 297.
Request of Kyle Smoot to address council regarding quiet zone for rail traffic in Central Eastside.
Good morning, Kyle. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. Sorry, are you getting a lot of feedback?
We are getting a little bit. Do you have is there a second microphone on there possibly?
Is this better?
Yeah, much.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Sorry about that. So thank you for taking the time to listen to my testimony. And first of all, thank you for serving our great city of Portland. Recently, we moved back within the city limits of Portland from Milwaukee. And unfortunately, multiple times a night, we are woken by trains, even though we live in the Arlington Heights neighborhood near the Japanese Garden, and the nearest railroad track is probably 2 miles away from us in the Central Eastside. And so I would like the city to work with the Federal Railway Association establishing a quiet zone within the Central Eastside. This would help minimize the noise within Portland, and I'm sure would improve the sleep of many Portlanders as these trains frequently go through this area of town multiple times at night. In addition, I think that by establishing a quiet zone, this would also help foster development within the Central Eastside and would hopefully improve the housing crisis that we are currently experiencing. As you know, these quiet zones have been shown to be safe and effective. While I lived in the Pearl District, a quiet zone was established right outside the building I lived in, and that significantly reduced the train noise. And more recently, while living in Milwaukee, a quiet zone was also established, which also had a similar impact. I realize that there are many issues that the City Council is addressing currently, given especially the changes that have occurred over the last year in this city. However, as you know, these processes take time to implement, and starting this process now, I think, would be beneficial for many Portlanders in the future. I moved from Cincinnati, Ohio over 20 years ago, and I love this city. I'm saddened by what has occurred in this city, and as citizens of this great city, hoping that we can see some positive change occur. unfortunately, I think if change is not going to occur, many people will continue to leave that love the city and pay taxes. And unfortunately, I may not be far behind them. So again, I'd like to thank you for your time today.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Next individual, 298, please, Keelan.
Request of Lori McFarlane to address council regarding despite Flint, Portland water betrays the public trust and our health. And it looks like Lori might not be connected right at this moment.
All right.
Should we move on to 299?
Yeah, why don't we move on to D299?
Okay. Request of D White to address council regarding despite Flint, Portland water betrays the public trust and our health.
Good morning, Dee.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All righty. My name, I want to make sure, okay. My name is Dee White. Portland Water has exceeded the federal action level for lead 12 times since the lead and copper rule was adopted in 1991. More by far than any other large water system in the U.S. Today, our water is still unsafe from lead, and we still have levels significantly higher than most, if not all, other large systems, including Pittsburgh, Seattle, Greater Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. Our water is not safe and never has been safe due to high lead levels. Last week, a House Ways and Means subcommittee led by Oregon Representative Blumenauer met on infrastructure investment. Michigan Representative Dan Kildee introduced Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, a pediatrician in Flint, Michigan. The rest of my testimony will be excerpts from their testimony. Representative Kildee said, I care about my home community, which has been through awful hard times preceding the water crisis. But during that crisis, this city of 100,000 people was exposed to dangerous levels of lead. As Dr. Mona has said, lead is a deadly, dangerous neurotoxin. It affects brain development. It has lifelong impacts in children. When residents started complaining about the quality of water, state officials at that point in time told them, and this is a quote, just relax. So because of research that Dr. Mona did, the state was finally forced to reverse course and start to act. But as many of my colleagues know, Flint is not some sort of anomaly. It's a wake-up call for the rest of America. When it comes to the lead issue, we are going to pay enormously for this painful health crisis if we don't fix the problems now. And it's not just going to come in the form of dollars and cents that we will lose. The loss of possibility for kids is impossible to put a number on. Dr. Mona said, lead is a poison with no safe level and can forever alter the trajectories of children. When it comes to lead, the only cure is prevention. Flint's crisis was not the first, the last, or the worst. The story of Flint is not an isolated story. It is a story that continues throughout this nation. Lead literally drops IQ levels. It impacts behavior, causes cognitive and developmental problems, focusing problems, growth problems, hearing problems. Kids exposed to lead as adults get things like high blood pressure and early dementia. So if we want to make our nation smarter and stronger and healthier and more competitive in our global environment, economy, and we do need every single IQ point to compete, we have to finally rid our nation of this public health scourge. Chairman Blumenauer replied, thank you, Dr. Mona. It was well worth waiting for. I think that's compelling that the only cure is prevention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Appreciate your being here today. Keelan, do we want to try Lori again and see if she was able to log on?
Oh, wait a minute. Looks like
Lori McFarlane, are you here?
Let's see.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep, we do. Is that you, Lori?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
President Biden recently said there's hundreds of Flints, and Portland is certainly among those. Other cities like us are taking immediate actions to fix their water lead crisis. First of all, it's well established that even at low levels, lead is a cumulative neurotoxin to developing brains. Pregnant women, bottle-fed babies, and children under 6 are most vulnerable. An OHSU groundbreaking study found a causal relationship between lead and childhood ADHD, and an international scientist found new links to cardiovascular adult deaths. In 1997, the Portland Water Bureau created an alternative to federal regulation called the Lead Hazard Reduction Program. It allows higher lead in drinking water by design, exacerbating the silent pediatric epidemic. Improper treatment corrodes public and private site infrastructure, releasing higher amounts of this toxic metal into our drinking water. 24 years later, the Portland Water Bureau still follows their homespun substitute with no data or analysis to show that it has protected our schools, daycares, parks, and homes. In fact, the numbers show Portland in the nation's worst, while Seattle got to work decades ago to significantly reduce water lead. Why does this matter to you? Well, as a Portland Water Bureau funded program, Multnomah County Health's Bloodline investigates homes where pregnant women and young children live who have elevated blood lead. Yet the home investigator rarely tests their drinking water, focusing mainly on paint. Nevertheless, even without this critical data, they and Water Bureau leaders have disingenuously claimed they've never sourced lead poisoning to tap water. Worse, after speaking with us, PWB created a flawed water test that diminishes lead level results. Drinking water can be an important, if not primary, exposure source. Lead-poisoned children are simply not being protected here, and prevention is key. Therefore, water filters certified to remove lead should be the first default response. As Flint pediatrician Dr. Mona Hanna-Atisha says, quote, "We shouldn't be using our children as environmental detectors to begin with. Please write this 24-year wrong through this year's Water Bureau budget. Reallocate non-water funds to water filters for these children and to all pregnant and lactating mothers, formula-fed babies, and children under 6, especially disproportionately impacted communities of color and low income. Until Portland Water Bureau minimizes lead at users' taps as required by EPA's lead and copper rule, filters must become practice and policy." Finally, a friend of mine, a pediatrician serving East County, wanted me to tell you this. Quote, "I was previously unaware of the disproportionately high water lead release here, and I think it's crucial our communities should be protected, especially vulnerable pregnant persons and children. The Bureau should be at least providing free filters." Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here today. Keelan, have any items been pulled off of the consent agenda?
We've had no requests.
Please call the roll on the consent agenda.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Max.
Aye.
Rubio. Miller.
Aye. The consent agenda is approved. Next up, time certain item 300.
Proclaim May 5th, 2021 to be Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women.
Colleagues, today we recognize and raise awareness around the ongoing crisis that continues to plague our community and many communities, missing and murdered Indigenous women. Grassroots efforts and advocacy work have courageously led to calls for action around the world. And of course, there's still much work to be done. I'm very grateful for the leadership of the city's Office of Tribal Relations in bringing this important issue to light today as well as previously. I'm pleased to introduce Stone Hudson, the city's Tribal Relations Associate, and our invited guests. Stone, good morning, welcome. Please take it away.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler, and good morning, Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Ryan, Commissioner Rubio, and Commissioner Mapps. Thank you for providing time this morning for this very important proclamation, the City of Portland's 4th annual Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Awareness Day. My name is Stone Hudson. I am a member of the 3 affiliated tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara of the Fort Berthold Reservation located in North Dakota. I have recently joined the Office of Government Relations as the new Tribal Relations Associate. It has been a pleasure to join the OGR team. I would like to personally thank you for supporting the funding that allowed for the creation of my position. Director John has asked me to step in for her today. She sends her apologies for not being able to be present, as she is currently out of the office on bereavement leave. For too long, Native and First Nations women across North America have been victimized by violent crime at an alarmingly inequitable rate. While this week of awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women has garnered invaluable support from so many in the community, it's equally important we acknowledge and recognize those individuals who were never given the opportunity to return home. Having the opportunity to connect with the Indigenous community in Portland since starting at the city 6 weeks ago, to hear their stories and perspectives on the crisis has been a powerful experience for me. In sharing these perspectives, my hope is that a greater understanding will be fostered and we can all work towards eradicating this crisis. This morning, we are privileged to invite 2 community guest speakers to assist in presenting this year's proclamation. We will be hearing from Nikali Jimenez, a member of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, and Sky Young, an intertribal descendant of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the New Mexico Pueblo peoples, to provide testimonials. Without further ado, please welcome Nikali Jimenez.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nikali Jimenez. My Wasco name is Sumut, given to me by my maternal grandmother. I am a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Linnton and Yakima from my mother's family, and Mexica from my father's family. I am 11 years old and I am thankful to be here today in honor of our relatives and communities who experience the impact of missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives. Buenos días todos. Mi nombre es Nikali Jimenez. Mi nombre nativo es Sumut, un nombre dado a yo de mi bisabuela. En el lado de mi mamá, vengo de las naciones indígenas de Warm Springs, Wasco, Pintun, Paiute, Linnton y Yakima. En el lado de mi papá, vengo de Nahua o Mexica. Tengo 11 años. Estoy feliz por estar aquí porque en honor de las relaciones y comunidades que he estado el impacto en mujeres y relaciones indígenas que mueren. Today, I want to share a few words with you as we are on Indigenous lands gathered here in what we call Portland, and caring for the land, the cultures and ceremony for each other, and we are still here. Today, I want to share a poem that I wrote that talks about a magic stick. I believe the magic stick is one that we can all carry in our actions and words from experiences that our Indigenous communities face, and to support today's proclamation for missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. The magic stick is brown. In the forest, it charges in the sun. Ding, it's ready to go. It flies around the forest, searching for sadness. It sees a fox on the ground and pulls the thorn out of his foot. It sees trash on the land and puts it away in the can. It sees a dying tree and uses its life to connect it. A new magic stick is born. Thank you all for gathering here today to hear these words. I want you to know that as a youth, as I grow, that we all continue to work together for our future, for our Indigenous communities. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Nikali. Next, I would like to introduce Sky Young.
Good morning. My name is Sky Youngs, and I am the Portland Community College Native Nations Club Coordinator. Today, I am speaking to you as an intertribal descendant on behalf of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives Day. This day holds very serious meaning to myself and many friends and relatives who have experienced the violence against Indigenous Native Americans that are a reality throughout this country. As of 2019, Native Americans accounted for approximately 1.5% of North America's population, yet we make up more than 10% of the homeless population nationally. As you might know, human trafficking, kidnapping, violent assault, and murder are among the highest in the homeless populations. And Native Americans have higher exploitation rates than any other. Our people, our women in particular, are among an estimated 40% of victims of sexual trafficking, over a third of those being youth. With this year's catastrophic pandemic, the tragic fires from last fall, many of our people have yet to recover. Our community, who are now forced into homelessness by loss of family, work opportunities, and affordable housing, are more at risk than ever before. Although I identify as Two-Spirit, I also acknowledge the stark fact that my experience growing up in this world has been that of a female, seen by predators as a vulnerable target. I spent most of my youth and young adult life homeless, some of which was in downtown Portland. Let me tell you, it's one of the hardest lives to live. Many of us, especially youth, have no choice in the matter. We are among the most defenseless and endangered. In being so, I implore you, as citizens, as council members, to take action in protecting and supporting our people. The condition of our Earth Mother is reflected in the condition of our human mothers and their children, our relatives. With Mother's Day approaching, I want you to keep this in mind. What if it was your mother who was missing, or worse, found murdered? What if it was your sister, or brother, or significant other? What would you do? What kind of change would you want to see in the systems that should be helping to serve and protect your people, your loved ones? Protecting their rights will help protect the world. Empowering them will heal our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Sky. This concludes the community testimonials for the 4th annual Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Awareness Day. Again, we thank you tremendously for providing this platform for us to share. Thank you.
Stone, thank you. And thank you to our guests for providing testimony. That's just so appreciated. Before I read the proclamation, I'd like to give some space to my colleagues to speak as well. I see Commissioner Mapps has his hand up, then Commissioner Hardesty, then Commissioner Rubio, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. I really want to recognize our invited speakers today, Nikali and Sky. Very powerful testimony. I also want to express my appreciation to Council for pausing to recognize today, May 5th, as a National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Native Women, girls, and their relatives. The rates of violence against Native American women are alarming. 4 out of 5 Indigenous women have experienced violence in their lives. On some reservations, Native women are murdered at a rate more than 10 times the national average. What's happening to Indigenous women here in the state of Oregon is unacceptable. In addition to declaring today a National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Native Women, girls, and their relatives, we must also take a comprehensive approach to protecting the lives of Indigenous women. It's my hope that this approach will bolster tribal autonomy and authority, improve coordination among law enforcement agencies, and expand access to culturally appropriate support services. If you share that hope, please join this council today in honoring the Native American women, girls, and their relatives who have disappeared or have been murdered. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stone Hudson, you did an excellent job of representing your office extremely well today. And thank you for putting together the speakers. Nikali is the feature of our Native community, and Sky is the lived experience of what Native women have been telling us over and over and over again. And what I'd like to see us do next year is to be able to say to Nikali and Sky, these are the policy changes, these are the protocol changes that we've made to how we respond when a Native American woman calls 911 because of domestic violence. That's what I want to see next year. I want to see what are the state policy changes that will be part of the City Council's legislative agenda that will really make sure that the state is held accountable for creating partnerships and agreements with Native governments that are cooperative around ensuring that murdered and missing Native women aren't just a reality, but we are just as vigorously investigating those as we do some other things. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to actually do something rather than acknowledge. And I'm going to commit to next year, I'm going to be able to come back with some of those answers, because I just don't think it's fair that you come and tell us this is what your lived experience is, and we don't have a plan to address it. So I look forward to continuing to work with Lord John and now Stone Hudson and my Native sisters who really are suffering, and they continue to tell us so. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you. I want to also thank Lord John and also Stone Hudson for bringing this important proclamation forward and for raising awareness about this ongoing issue with missing and murdered Indigenous women and the crisis that it is. I also want to sincerely thank Sky Youngs for joining us today with that important testimony. And also especially, I'll join my colleagues in especially acknowledging Necali Jimenez for their beautiful and important poem. Necali, we all need a magic stick to remind us about the love and the courage and the healing that we're capable of bringing into the world. So I thank you for reminding us of that very important lesson today. The high rates of violence are shocking, and the inaction is simply indefensible. And our values and our conscience demand that we cannot be silent nor continue to be inactive about it. And this crisis is happening in our own backyard, and we have a responsibility to be informed and to care about this, and a responsibility to take some action. I've also just learned that just recently there have finally been some steps forward in at least improving some data collection and cross-jurisdictional partnerships, but it's not nearly enough to match the urgent need for action. And we need to continue to do more. So I know my council colleagues are all aligned with I'm aligned with them in standing together with the Indigenous community in a commitment to stay engaged and to actively engage in actions that will put an end to this crisis. And I just want to thank everyone again for giving such a strong voice and a call to action about this important work ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director John, for organizing this day, and welcome aboard, Stone. It's great to have you here. And I want to just acknowledge the guest, Necali. Yeah, the magic stick will hopefully be in my heart, that poem, the rest of the day. As Sky Young, your testimony was incredibly powerful, and there are no words that I can add except to say that it went directly where it needed to land for me. So my heart is full, and my thoughts are with the families and those who've lost a daughter, a sister, a mother, a friend. It's so good to have this honest presentation this morning. This epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, MMIW, is a tragedy with deep intersectional roots, including white supremacy and misogyny. I stand in solidarity with Native families, advocates, and Indigenous nations who continue to challenge the silence, tolerance, and inaction in response to this crisis. I urge our public safety bureaus to continue to work with our community partners, the federal government, and engage in government-to-government consultation with tribal government to address this crisis. I'm grateful to be aligned with the council who wants to take action, and I thank you again for being here this morning.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Colleagues, with that, I will now read the proclamation on behalf of the City Council. Whereas the City of Portland joins a growing chorus of local, state, tribal, and national governments supporting the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And whereas the lasting effects of colonization and a history of oppressive policies directly correlate to the rise of violence against Indigenous women and girls in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central America, and all U.S. territories. And whereas the disappearances and murders of women and girls is violence and corresponding these acts of violence and corresponding oversight and neglect of government law enforcement is a continued form of genocide and is a direct threat to tribal sovereignty, thus compromising Indian country's self-determination and self-governance. And whereas the City of Portland recognizes that the issues of missing and murdered Indigenous women are not isolated to reservations or rural communities, but impact urban areas like the Portland policy to address this crisis, led by Madam Secretary Deborah Holland of the Department of the Interior, in creation of the Missing and Murdered Unit within the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Justice Services. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 5th, 2021 to be Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women in Portland, and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you, and thank you, Stone, and thank you to our invited guests today. We appreciate it. Thank you to my colleagues for your comments as well. We cannot quite move to the next time certain item, so why don't we instead go to the regular agenda item number 308.
Authorize intergovernmental agreement with the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District not to exceed $6 million to develop an organizational structure and a method to fund operations of the district.
Commissioner Maps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. Let me start by saying this. Large parts of North Portland, including the Portland International Airport, Delta Park, and many other natural areas, businesses, and other infrastructure are protected by a 27-mile long levee system along the Columbia River. The Oregon legislature, acting on the recommendations of regional leaders and managers of the levee system, established a new district to reduce the risk of major flooding. Now, this new district will also support the environmental, economic, and recreational value of the lands along the river. This ordinance that we are considering today would authorize environmental services to provide a $6 million loan to the new Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District to help the district during its establishment phase. This money will be paid back by 2031. And here today with a brief presentation is Environmental Services Director Michael Jordan and City Debt Manager Matt Gierrock. And with that, why don't I kick it over to staff?
Thank you, Commissioner, and Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having us today. Very briefly, the Commissioner covered most of the big points, which I appreciate, but just a little bit of detail, particularly for those of you who have just started this year. Since 2012, the region, including a number of cities in Multnomah County, Metro, Multnomah County itself, the port, and the 4 drainage districts that currently manage the levee system have been working together to try and continue the levees as an operating piece of infrastructure that can be certified by FEMA so that FEMA can provide low-cost flood insurance to the properties that lie behind the levee. Without that certification, that insurance is not available and would virtually stop development within the managed floodplain, would present all kinds of complications to the current businesses, which employ about 48,000 folks in Multnomah County and the region. And so the recertification, it's been known since 2012, is essential for the continued vibrancy of the area and for the city and the region. Those entities, as Commissioner Mapps noted, came together and asked the legislature to form the newly formed Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District. That happened in the 2019 legislature. The legislature also granted $500,000 to that new district to begin operations. That will carry the district through this fiscal year, but as of July 1st of this year, funding for that new district is uncertain. The district has asked the legislature for $1 million per year in the coming biennium. However, we know that the 21 session will be different than the 19 session. The fiscal situation of the state is significantly different. We are still hopeful that that grant will come through, but we probably won't know, as some of you who watch the legislature closely know, we probably won't know till late June if that money actually is adopted by the legislature. And again, we turn into a pumpkin, if you will, on July 1st. And so working with Matt and a number of the CFO and the city treasurer and the city budget office, we've developed an IGA which would really allow the district, if necessary, to draw on a line of credit over the next 5 years. If they don't get the grant from the legislature or don't get the full grant, they would be able to draw on this line up to $1.2 million per year for the next 5 years. We believe that the district will be able to put a permanent, adequate funding structure in place during that time, which will then allow the district to begin in 2027 to begin paying that money back to the city, fully paying it back by 2031, as Commissioner Mapps noted. So that's why we're here today, is to authorize us to enter into that intergovernmental agreement. It should be noted for the council that these dollars are envisioned to come from the city's sewer fund. And we've checked with city attorney also about being able to do this. It is fine as long as that money gets paid back. However, there is uncertainty. This new district does not currently have an adequate permanent funding source. That's the whole idea of the interim board, to put that in place right now. However, if under the worst of circumstances that district should default on this loan, then the general fund would be the ultimate backup for this money, and the sewer fund would need to be repaid from the general fund. I'd invite Matt to add any comments he wishes to that, but I wanted the council to be clear about the dynamics of the risk, if you will. We're very confident that this district will be successful, but there's always that ultimate, downside that you need to be aware of. With that, I'll stop and answer any questions you might have, or invite Matt to add anything he wishes.
No, nothing to add.
Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Jordan, for that very thorough information. I actually remember you and I went out on a boat and we actually looked at this up close and personal. And so I know how important putting this district is, not just for the businesses and houseboat owners, but also there's a community that's impacted directly. It was a very inclusive process that was including the entire community in this effort. I just want for my newer colleagues to understand at some point, if the district is successful, people will be elected to serve on this board, and those will be folks that represent this particular district. So ultimately, a democratic process will ensure that it works the way it's supposed to. So, so my only question is, why do we have to wait till 27 to start getting money back?
It's a good question, Commissioner. The bottom line question. Thank you for the current schedule that we have is that the district is going through a process of kind of a mission, vision, values process, engaging with the community. You're aware, Commissioner, and thank you for mentioning that the mission of this district is broader than the mission of the old drainage district. So it includes an environmental assessment of the area. It includes a water quality planning process. It also includes a cultural and recreational component to the mission. And so there will be a broad engagement process with the community to both develop the mission and vision values, but also then to develop that funding structure. I believe you and I did talk about the possibility of a utility type structure in the area. You are absolutely right to note that there are 8,000 residences within the managed floodplain, many of them low income. And so it will be critical that we consider things like progressivity and equity and those issues as we develop that permanent source. So that will take some time. We're hopeful to put that in place in calendar 24, hopefully having it become operational on July 1st. That would allow the drainage districts then to not assess their normal assessment, which would have happened in November. If that can be put in place in that time frame, then that would allow us to then call for that election that you noted, and it's a special district, and so their elections happen in the spring of odd numbered years. And so the permanent board would get elected in the spring of 25, allowing them then to absorb the old districts and then ultimately begin payment in the spring of 27. That's kind of the time frame. And then there would be annual payments to be completed by 2031.
Thank you. I love this project. I love the process. I understand the time and due diligence that's necessary to really do it right, because you know we don't get to do these things over when we do them not so well. So I am very supportive. So if they get the grant from the state, assume that your contract will not allow for these dollars to be released unless there is a need specifically for these funds.
That's correct, Commissioner. The IGA limits to the degree that the district gets other sources of revenue. It then limits the amount, with total then being up to 1.2 million.
Excellent. And my very last question, you can see how geeked out I am on this. If you hadn't taken me out on the water, I wouldn't have been all geeked out on this. My last question is, I hope you're also keeping your eye on recovery dollars as they come in, because I suspect there's going to be an opportunity to really tap into relief dollars and recovery dollars that will probably make it unnecessary for too much of these dollars to be utilized.
Commissioner, you're absolutely right. There are multiple potential federal sources, not only for the operation of the district, but for the capital improvements that will be necessary on the levees. You are aware we're working with the Corps on a plan. So hopefully will be some kind of an infrastructure bill come out soon. Levies are specifically mentioned in every conversation I heard. And so you're absolutely right. We'll be looking at multiple federal.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you answering all my questions.
Thank you.
I should go ahead. Yeah, got it. No, you're muted. That's why. Thank you, Director Jordan. I'm learning a lot, and I'm going to geek out a bit with Commissioner Hardesty. You know, we're not far from the anniversary. It was Memorial Day that years ago that took out Vanport. As we know, the snow is melting, and this is when the rivers are the highest, actually, in May and June. Welcome to Portland, for those of you that don't know that. And so it's great to have this timely conversation. You also really educated me on, I'm kind of blown away that this wasn't already established now that you're hearing the significance of it. And thank you for methodically bringing me through what the process is like. I'm also noticing how Portland's stretching in its leadership role that goes beyond our geography, if you will. Will there be intergovernmental agreements with whether it's Troutdale or Sandy or, I just want to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. The new district's boundary is larger than the old 4 districts. They were the managed floodplain. That was the boundary of their district. The new district has all of Multnomah County inside the urban growth boundary. And so the idea of stretching the base, if you will, of support for the levees was the idea behind that larger landscape, which of course includes the cities in the eastern part of the urban growth boundary. They have been at the table the entire time through the whole 5 or 6 years. I fully expect that the permanent funding mechanism will include some contribution from the rest of the area. One of the determinations we would have to make if it were a utility model is that that's a fee-for-service model, and you'd need to establish a nexus between the service provided by the district and the benefit of who's paying. And that was one of the details that we'd be working our way through in the next few years. But the drainage from those cities, much of the area of many of those smaller cities, not only is part of their city in the floodplain, but the drainage from the upland area has to be conveyed through the floodplain to the Columbia River. And the district, one of the district roles is also to convey surface water. And so they would participate in that way also.
Thank you. We're very fortunate to have your lived experience and connecting the dots here. And thank you, Commissioner Mapps, for being on top of this. It was an agenda item that I was curious about, and now I find it to be incredibly intriguing and helpful. Thank you for the storytelling to bring it home for us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And Director Jordan, I just have a sort of a basic question. This is an operational, this is an interim funding mechanism.
That's correct.
And it assumes certain things about revenue generation and self-sufficiency, repayment. And then at the time that we've reached that financial stability, it's my understanding, then the district assumes the responsibility for the Columbia River levee system, as well as absorbing the 4 the drainage districts. In effect, they would be dissolved.
That's correct.
So we're making certain assumptions about revenues and potential resources coming in. What if they don't materialize? What's the escape route, or what's the plan B?
Well, there are a couple of different options, Mr. Mayor. One, obviously, if the new district cannot form a permanent funding source, then the current interim board cannot call for the elections and the absorption of the drainage districts. So the 4 drainage districts would remain what are known as the local sponsors. of the levy. And so they would not take on the obligation of this debt, but they would still have the obligation of the local sponsors. And I have to say, Mr. Mayor, one of the motivations for this discussion in the first place is that about 80% of the property value and the economic loss from a flood would accrue to property in the city of Portland. And so for a number of reasons, at least we've been viewing this over the last 6 or 7 years as the city cannot allow this to fail. And so this is another, if you will, step forward for the city to be a contributor towards the success of the region. But specifically to your question, as I explained, Mr. Mayor, the sewer fund is putting up the money for the loan initially. If for some reason the district fails and cannot pay the loan back, ultimately the general fund would be obliged to repay the sewer fund so that we would keep our own integrity regarding the use of sewer funds for the sewer system.
All right, and you know, not to make light of the amount, and any amount is material, but it's obviously a risk that the general fund could fairly easily absorb. So I'm not particularly worried about that backstop. And then one last question: is the time frame flexible? I heard 5 years. You know, that at least the goal was to pay back BES in 5 years, but if there are operational problems or obstacles or something funky is going on, is that time frame flexible, or would it require you to come back to council for a second bite at the apple?
I believe we would have to come back to council, Mr. Mayor, because I believe the time schedule is in the IGA. However, from a practical perspective, and given what I said before about Portland's interest in success, I think the IGA would be highly renegotiable if we were well on our way, and maybe the payment schedule needs to be 6 or 7 years rather than 5. We can renegotiate that.
Okay, that sounds good. And it sounds like we're negotiating with very willing parties here. So that so makes it easy.
Indeed, yes.
Good. All right, thank you for answering my questions. Keelan, is there any public testimony on this item?
No one is on the line for this item.
All right, very good. This is an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you so much for the excellent work, Director Jordan. This has been a long time in the works, as you said, and I am really happy to see the city stepping up in a way that really supports the community controlling their destiny and being a really good partner. I'm happy to vote aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thanks, Mike. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, commissioners.
You bet. Thank you. We'll go back to time certain item number 301, please.
Authorize a 5-year joint development agreement with Pierce Manufacturing, Inc. for a reduced carbon emissions fire apparatus not to exceed $837,875.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Believe that I have Jay here to present on this matter. Let me just say that I am really excited to have this on the agenda, and I look forward to Jay giving us the information for this item 301. Jay, would you please take it away? Is it you, Jay, or is it Bill? It's Bill. Okay, Bill, take it away.
Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, and good morning, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Maps, Commissioner Ryan, and Commissioner Rubio. Thank you for taking the time today to listen to us. My name is Bill Goforth. I'm the Logistics Deputy Chief for Portland Fire and Rescue, and with me today is Senior Business Operations Manager Jay Blow. And we're here today to present an ordinance requesting the City Council's authorization to enter into a 5-year joint development agreement for a reduced carbon emission fire apparatus. Portland Fire and Rescue has the opportunity to joint develop and operate a newly designed fire apparatus that fits within the city's 2015 Climate Action Plan. This project is in line with the mayor's 2020-2021 general fund budget guidance, directing bureaus to prioritize actions to reduce carbon emissions. The direct impact to our community and environment will be the reduced carbon emissions emitted from the fire apparatus and cleaner air to breathe. Funding for this project is covered by Portland Fire and Rescue's ongoing capital budget for apparatus replacement and Portland Fire and Rescue's Apparatus Reserve Fund. Portland Fire and Rescue is also actively researching potential grant funding to assist with the purchase. The costs include $690,000 for the fire apparatus and $148,000 for the purchase and installation of an apparatus support system at a fire station. Again, Portland Fire and Rescue is requesting the support and authorization to enter into a joint development agreement. Thank you for your time and consideration, and we're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Very good. I've got a couple. First of all, I want to make it very clear that I support the electrification of our vehicles at the City of Portland, and I support us taking a lead role in being innovators in doing what we can to reduce our carbon emissions. But I do have some questions about this nonetheless. First of all, this is a joint agreement. I assume you mean with Pierce Manufacturing. They are our partner in this.
That's correct.
They have been manufacturing these vehicles for how long and how many are deployed?
So I'm not exactly sure how long the plant's been in service, but we do have all our fire apparatus, our first line Pierce apparatus in the city.
This is an electric vehicle, is that correct? Or is it electric assist? Tell me about this system.
So,
excuse me, Mayor, if I may just jump in. We are happy to answer very specific questions that you have, but you may remember I told you that there was a what's the term?
Oh, the NDA. You did, and so who? Well, let me do this. Do we have somebody from legal counsel who can tell me if my question is not a question that I can ask? I shouldn't put you in that position, Commissioner Hardesty. There should be somebody else who's running interference.
So
thank you. That's why. Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So who wants to play that role?
Mayor, may I make a recommendation?
Yes.
How about we table this until this afternoon and take it? Wait, we're not meeting this afternoon, are we?
That is correct. We are not.
We could table it, take a short break, get your questions answered, and come back. I just don't want us to do anything that would violate the NDA. And,
I'm not sure the questions I asked necessarily would. Is there somebody from the Fire Bureau or somebody from? Can we move this to later in the agenda? And could we get somebody from legal counsel who's reviewed the NDA to then run interference? And if they say no, you can't ask that in public, then I won't. I don't want to violate the NDA, but we should have some, because my suspicion is the questions I'm asking are not proprietary.
I believe they are.
They are? You can't tell me if it's an electric vehicle? Okay.
I believe we've been really clear about what we can and cannot say. So.
Okay, yeah, so let's move on, and we will come back to this at the end of the regular agenda, if that's okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, so we'll move on from that time certain. The good news is we can go to the next one, 302, please.
Proclaim May 2021 to be Mental Health Month.
Today, colleagues, we have a proclamation recognizing Mental Health Month. Of Oregon's approximately 3.8 million residents, close to 137,000 adults and about 39,000 children live with severe mental health conditions. The rate of mental illness is more than twice as likely in young adults aged 18 to 25 than people older than 50. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on the mental health of people of all ages. And now more than ever, it's critical to reduce the stigma around mental health struggles that commonly prevents individuals from either seeking or receiving help. There are practical tools that everyone can use to improve their mental health and increase resiliency, regardless of the situations they're dealing with. It's important to accept the situations in life that we can't change, recognize when trauma may be affecting one's mental health, actively work to process the mental struggles associated with big changes, manage anger and frustration, challenge negative thinking patterns, and make time to care for oneself. Knowing when to turn to friends, family, and coworkers when one's struggling with life's challenges can help improve one's mental health. Seeking professional help when self-help efforts to improve your mental health aren't working is a sign of strength, not weakness. Chief Human Resources Officer Kathy Bless is here this morning to speak about wellness for city employees and introduce the rest of our speakers. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I am Kathy Bless, BHR Director, and I'm so proud to be here today to join my colleagues in recognizing May 2021 as Mental Health Month. I would like to thank Joel Michaels, Courtney Gilmore, and Taisha McCool-Riley for their commitment to city employees and the continual support of wellness, well-being, and balance they offer to employees. And you will be hearing from each of these individuals this morning. Within this proclamation are commitments we all need to live into, including BHR, about prioritizing trauma-informed approaches within our practices, policies, procedures, processes, lived experiences, and our behavior. There is much work to be done. The ability for employees to show up at work, whether in person or virtually, over the past pandemic year has been complex. As we have continued to acknowledge, our employees who are caregivers of small children, adult parents, or other dependents have balanced enormous burdens to keep their families safe and cared for at the expense of themselves. And while they continued also to provide service to the city. All of this, of course, impacts recruitment, rehiring, retention, and productivity. We know all of Council shares the same concerns. Continued support and learning is needed to become truly supportive and inclusive while ensuring safety and balance to provide the important services the city offers to its community. Ensuring employees understand they can use accrued sick leave for mental health and take care of their well-being will be highlighted in the next iteration of the Human Resource Administrative Rules and will continue to be messaged within BHR communications. Mental health and well-being starts with leadership who set the tone, expectations, and norms within their bureaus and within, as commissioners, your portfolios. I encourage us all to lead by example and look for ways to create a safe and supportive environment for our workers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important value, and I would like to now introduce Joel Michaels.
Good morning. I'm Joel Michaels, nurse practitioner and the city's Occupational Health and Wellbeing Program Manager. I'm happy to be here today to talk about the city's progress towards integrating mental health well-being opportunities for our workforce through the City Strong Employee Wellbeing Program. So my experience as a healthcare provider has shown me the importance of taking a holistic approach to helping people. I learned that by prescribing treatment without first establishing a trusting relationship, where we discuss the patient's mood, their stressors, readiness to make change, identify barriers, and set achievable goals together, the treatment would often fail. By normalizing and openly addressing mental health challenges and allowing people to make their own informed choices, setting their own priorities, people often reach or exceed their treatment goals and are met with success. As the city's Occupational Health and Wellbeing Program Manager, it's been my goal to bring health and wellness opportunity to employees that also take a holistic and person-centered approach, and that one that's not prescriptive, but is instead empowering and inclusive for all. City Strong achieved this by assembling a cross-bureau steering team to provide program design input from diverse work groups, including supervisors, managers, union members, non-represented workers, first responders, field and office staff. Employees are empowered to set their own goals, and when they're ready, to engage with whatever opportunity or campaign they identify with. Along with Courtney Gilmore, our experienced energetic wellness program coordinator, together we are providing well-being opportunities to all employees that I am proud to highlight today. Our primary focus has been on mental health these last 2 years, though we've also provided opportunities, resources, and support with physical fitness as well. The mental health focus has one simple objective: to destigmatize mental health challenges so that employees will seek support or professional help. We do this through benefit design, messaging, education, providing resources, and offering on-site experiential events. While 1 in 5 adults in the US experience mental health illness each year, and 25% of US workers identify work as a source of stress, only a small number tell their employer or seek treatment. Our own health claim experience with MODA and Kaiser confirmed that mental health services are underutilized considering how many people are at risk. To address this, we suggested removing the copays for mental health services, including substance abuse treatment. And by approving and recently renewing this change, the Labor Management Benefit Committee stood firmly behind our goal to remove barriers to treatment and help convey the message that the city is committed to supporting and encouraging mental health treatment. We then partnered with our EAP provider, Cascade Centers, to help with messaging and to raise mental health awareness and encourage the use of mental health services. We added their Whole Life Directions tool that includes an emotional wellness survey that helps the employee identify opportunities and set personalized goals while providing resources or referral to a licensed therapist when needed. This wellness platform includes a smartphone app that can be used as a coaching tool to keep people on track with their mental health goals. We recognize that an employee's direct supervisor or manager is one of the most important and influential people when it comes to that employee's work-life balance, stress level, and perception of support for addressing mental health in the workplace. We asked Cascade Centers to provide a manager training webinar series to help managers improve mental health in the workplace through prevention, early identification, and crisis intervention when needed. These were delivered by live webinar and remain archived on the City Strong website, along with other webinar videos that any employee may access at any time. Topics include time management, coping strategies for caregivers, resilience and mental flexibility, mindfulness-based stress reduction, wellness at work, and healthy sleep, to name a few. We tapped other vendor partners for program content as well, including MODA and Kaiser, who also provided webinars that are available on the City Strong website. City Strong facilitates movement and mindfulness challenges for employees through the Walker Tracker platform, where employees can log mood, sleep, hydration, food choices, and steps by linking with a smartphone or wearable device. We will begin a new challenge and competition next month with Multnomah County to see whose employees can more consistently reach mental and physical health goals in a fun and engaging event. Live events are also available to employees, though virtually at this time. Courtney leads mindfulness and breathing exercises at meetings, and there are morning yoga and stretching sessions available daily. City Strong has a menu of options of educational topics that any work group or manager can schedule for their team to experience, including both physical and mental health topics around mindful eating, sleep, movement, stress management, conflict resolution, and more. Courtney has also facilitated open forums where employees could gather and share their experience around recent stressful events, including the November election and protests. We also joined national mental health awareness campaigns and have sent out citywide messaging on suicide prevention, Substance Abuse, Quitting Nicotine, and Mental Health Awareness Month, which just started May 1st. I'm proud of the mental health focus and support that the City of Portland provides to our employees. While we have more people to reach with the message that it's normal to experience mental health challenges as a working adult in this city, I'm happy to say that thanks to City Strong, those that do hear our message and recognize their mental health needs will find easily accessible resources and readily available support through the Bureau of Human Resources and our benefits team. This proclamation today will also help with that mission, so I thank you. Taisha McCool-Riley will speak next.
Good afternoon, all. I'm going to pull up my notes here. First, I would like to start off by saying good morning and welcome to those of you who work for the city, who work in the city, those who live here, and those who serve in the City of Portland. We thank each of you for joining us today. Also, good morning and welcome to you, Mayor, Commissioners, and all other city staff and affiliates. Thank you all for joining us as we acknowledge May 2021 as Mental Health Awareness Month. My name is Taisha McCool-Riley, and I am a Portland native, and I am the one and only mental health program specialist for the City of Portland, housed with the Office of Community and Civic Life, working to implement systemic change work that will examine the city's fundamental systemic policies and practices to implement adaptive change to include providing practical tools, resources, and education related to mental health, and building support and training to promote awareness, to destigmatize, and to increase proactivity from equity and inclusion approach to invisible disabilities. Yes, I'd like to start off by yesterday, I had the pleasure of being a part of a conversation that Dr. Webster conducted. And in that, she started off with discussing her why. And as she did that, I thought about that for today. And so I just want to give you a brief about my why. I grew up in North Portland, a little Black girl, before gentrification, when I grew up with people that looked like me. I grew up in a neighborhood where I lived in between two rival gangs. It was not unheard of for there to be a shootout between the two rival gangs. And in that, I was exposed to different things and environments. And so society had another story written for me. And through working through that and pushing past that with the love and the care of parents and grandparents who are saying, you can be more than what you're around and what you see, I was able to recognize and embrace my worth and my value to the world and to myself. And in doing that, I endured and I continue to endure the effect of generational trauma and oppression within my family and within my community at large. And in that, I grew a desire to be a change agent who helps to heal the heart and the mind. And so in that, I pushed past my prescribed destiny to break barriers, to show up unapologetically, and to elevate myself and my people. And when I say my people, I mean the human race. I mean people in general, right? And so now I have a background as a mental health clinician. And I say all this to really illustrate my drive, my motivation, and my passion to really elevate the importance of wellness and healing. This work is very personal for me. So when I show up in places and spaces within the city, and I'm really pushing for us to elevate the prevalence of mental health disabilities, this is just not something I'm doing because I'm in the role at the city. This is something that lives deep within my soul and my spirit. And I know that that is something that I am called and charged to do. And so with that, I thought it was important. I think it's important for us to be able to see the people behind the work that is being done. And in that, as we gather today in solidarity and acknowledging the prevalence of mental health disabilities and promoting the significance of mental health education, awareness, and advocacy against social stigma related to mental health disabilities, we declare today, this month is a time that we can all play a part in, because we have a chance to ask ourselves, what do I need? Or what does the person that I care about need to be well? Mental Health Awareness Month reminds us of the importance of our mental health, to recognize our reality, to reflect on the changes we would like in our lives, and to implement new ways of being in the world. In doing this, we must understand the significance of maintaining our mental wellness. And so in that, we have to understand that mental health is the underpinning for our emotions, our perception, our tolerance, our communication, our learning, our judgment, our resilience, and our self-worth. Mental health involves effective functioning in daily activities, resulting in productive activities, building and maintaining healthy relationships, adapting to change and coping with adversity, the ability to adequately care for oneself, to effectively regulate your emotions, to make sound decisions, to effectively communicate, and to be rational in our thinking and in our judgment. As we increase our knowledge around mental health, we build our capacity to create safe, inclusive, equitable, and supportive spaces, policies, practices, and procedures. As we aspire to shift the culture, we must first see one another. And so right now, what I would encourage you to do in our virtual setting is, if everyone could pop onto your camera that feels safe and comfortable and is able to do so, if you can just turn on your camera for the next couple of seconds. And what I want us to do is, I just want us to look around, look at our screen. Take a moment just to look at the screen and glance at the people that you work among, that you serve with and alongside, or that you provide a service to. And just take a moment to take in the faces that you're seeing. Now that you've had a moment to take time and pause and to just look at the people around you that surround you virtually, I want you to ask yourself, who do you see? What do you see? And what don't you see? The first thing that should have been clear is that we are all people. People who don't look like what we may be dealing with or what we have gone through. And I want us to continue to ponder on that as I proceed. As a city, we must swiftly move from the robot mentality, where there is no room for people to be people, but rather trained machines that go, and go some more. Acknowledging our humanness enables individuals to be acknowledged as being made up of many different identities, mentally, spiritually, professionally, culturally, emotionally, deserving of dignity and respect. And if we are to think about people in that way, we are coming from a person-centered lens that says we as a city should be empowering staff through creating balance between personal and professional, while also creating spaces for people to bring forth how they are being impacted by many adverse circumstances, COVID, trauma, loss, racism, and all other types of trauma. Many of us are worried, stressed, overwhelmed, experiencing anxiety, battling depressive symptoms, experiencing trauma responses and traumatic events, among other adversities. Leaders included. If we are to reflect, for more than 12 months now, life as we knew it around the world has significantly changed. COVID-19 has created circumstances beyond our control that we have been forced to accommodate and adapt to. In doing so, many can identify with experiencing differing levels of distress, burnout, and anxiousness related to its impacts. At a time when people are experiencing a plethora of thoughts and feelings that can be overwhelming and difficult to process and work through, the city must step up and validate the experience of those in the workforce. So today, we say proudly and boldly, we see each and every person who experiences any form of mental health distress or mental health disability. Your experience matters, and I am personally working on your behalf to ensure that conversations continue to be had, information continues to be presented, and systems continue to be challenged. While May be Mental Health Awareness Month, every day is an opportunity for the city of Portland to rise to the occasion of uplifting the prevalence of mental health disabilities, breaking barriers, creating space for capacity building, and cultivating a culture that embraces trauma-informed approaches and practices. Today, we declare that you are not alone and that the city sees you, hears you, and values you. And as I close, I just will encourage us as we think about this month and months to come, that we center well-being, that we embed wellness into our practices daily, that we empower, we strengthen and realize what we have within us and allow people to walk in their truth and embrace their truth. I encourage us to refill our cups, right? Many of us probably have many slow leaks. And so I encourage us to take the time to care for ourselves, to take time to examine what our needs are and ways in which we can meet our own needs. And in that, how that watering of our own seeds will then create sprouting throughout the people that we encounter. As humans, refueling ourselves enables us to share our best selves with those we work with and encounter in our communities. And so in my closing, I will close with a quote. What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unshamed conversations. So as we go forth in our day to day and the days to come, I encourage us to really center, what does it look like to be well? What does it look like to be inclusive? What does it look like to be empathetic and to see others for the things that we can't see visually? How do we see people as people who have experiences that come from different places and different spaces and are impacted and show up in different ways? I thank you and I appreciate all of you being present today. And I will pass it to Courtney Gilmer.
We can't hear you, Courtney. No sound. You're not on mute.
Yep, you're not muted.
She's looking like she's looking for a youngster to come and help her fix her computer. That's what I would be doing.
I'll smile and take deep breaths.
Why don't we do this while Courtney is getting her technology sorted out? Why don't we go to comments from my colleagues? I'll read the proclamation last, but let's give Courtney a little space to sort that. And I'll take comments from my colleagues at this point, if anybody'd like to chime in.
I'm trying to get my hand up, Mayor, but it won't go.
Oh yeah, go for it, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Taisha, I could have listened to you all day. Thank you so much for both just bringing all of who you are and telling us your why at the beginning. I've always loved that that process. Thank you also, Joel. I learned a lot today. I had no idea that the city of Portland had all these programs that were online, that were accessible. And so I'm just going to be honest and say, as a commissioner, I feel like I need all the things you've talked about, and I don't know why I didn't know it wasn't there. So I'm going to certainly make sure to take advantage of it myself and make sure that the bureaus that I'm responsible for know, like I now know, that these resources are available. And I also want to acknowledge that you're absolutely right when you say that we've been through, I stopped counting at 4 crises last year. And what we know is that city employees have shown up, and they've shown up whether they had kids that they were trying to teach from home, or whether they were sharing space with partners who were also trying to do business from home. And they just bended and did, and with a smile, with the same dedication. And so I just want to acknowledge that the 4 crises that have hit all of us, starting with the pandemic, then the economic collapse, then the forest fires, then the racial justice reckoning, all those things have hit all of us, just like they've hit every other person on the planet. And we need to take more time to acknowledge the incredible work that city employees have done in spite of living through most of all the other crises. So I just want to take a moment and just say thank you. Thank you for being a resource to city employees. Thank you for raising the awareness. I always say that we're all temporarily mentally stable. And I know in any given day, I can go from one end of the spectrum to the other just because of the reality of what we do every single day in this city and because of the crises that we're all in. So I look forward to learning ways to relax and be mindful in the midst of 14, 16-hour days. I know my other colleagues will be excited about that as well. But we need to continue to, I think, remind the public that all of us are living through all these crises together. And we have some of the most dedicated public servants that work for the city of Portland. And we have to make sure that we take care of our people. Because if we don't take care of our people, then our people are just as devastated as many other folks are out in our community. So thank you, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, colleagues, and especially thank you for staff for their presentation this morning. You remind me that mental health is essential to overall health, and attending to mental health has become even more important during the COVID pandemic, which not only has negatively impacted many people's mental health, but has also created barriers to treatment. And I think that's why today's proclamation is so important. This month, we must renew our commitment to ridding our society of the stigma associated with mental illness. We encourage those living with mental health issues to get the help they need. We reaffirm our pledge to ensure that those who need help have access to the support, acceptance, and resources that they deserve. And we pledge solidarity with the families who need our support as well. At the same time, we must acknowledge that Oregon's mental health system is amongst the weakest in the nation. And as the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Emergency Communications, today I have the sad duty to report that the number of 911 calls that we get related to suicide are up 8% compared to this same time last year. That's why Portland needs to commit to ensuring that people living with mental health conditions are treated with compassion and respect and understanding. This council and our partners at Multnomah County, the state of Oregon, and the federal government must work together to do a better job of addressing our community's unmet mental health needs. That's why I'd like to call on all of us to strive to ensure that people living with mental health conditions know that they are not alone. There is hope, there is help, and there's a possibility of healing and thriving again. And finally, I'd like to close by saying that we must also remember to address the barriers that underserved communities, especially communities of color, face when they try to access affordable, high quality, and evidence-based mental health care. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rubio.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, for bringing this proclamation forward. And I also want to thank Joel, Taisha, and Courtney also for the presentation, also for the proclamation. It's an important time and it's an important space to remind us that amid all the policy discussions and funding discussions that we engage on, and when we talk about mental health and well-being, that at the core of it is truly about seeing people. And valuing people and the experience of people with mental health disabilities, and that everyone a part of this community is deserving of dignity, respect, and the opportunity to thrive and self-determine their lives. I too, like Commissioner Hardesty, was really struck by Taisha's words, and especially about moving out of a robotic interactions and towards a well-being centered culture here, where we create the space and actually create the value in filling our cups, and not feeling like it's taking away from our work. It is part of our work to re-nourish ourselves, and I could not agree more with that. And having worked in a trauma-informed community-based organization for so many years, I also want to underscore the importance of implementing trauma-informed practices and centering the voice of people living with mental health disabilities in City Hall and across our bureaus to ensure that we are abiding by our values and providing the care and consideration that our employees deserve. And especially as COVID has tested so many of us for over a year. And this is on top of the trauma of racism experienced by Black, Indigenous communities of color in our community and state daily and generationally. And we're still learning about the recent and longer term effects of isolation through this quarantine. That's still unfolding. So it's really up to all of us here at the city to acknowledge this reality and also the very real impacts on our very dedicated employees who are pouring their energy and time into this workplace to make it what it is to serve the broader community. I'm very, very excited to hear about the well-being opportunities that are happening and are in progress and are scheduled, and also about council making investments in bringing community together as a part of our safe reemergence into the community. Because if there's one thing we all know, that it's being in community and also being seen and valued in whatever form that means to you, that really heals and nurtures the spirit. So I just want to thank everyone again for involved, for reminding us to do our part as a city to take active and conscious steps in support of people living with all kinds of invisible disabilities. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Kathy. That was a wonderful opening. And Joel, I learned so much from your presentation. And Taisha, thank you for showing your humanity and staying in the why. That was awesome. And Courtney, I look forward to hearing from you soon. I hope the technical difficulties have been lifted. This is so important. I think everyone's spoken to the relevance of mental health today. And I'm going to just briefly touch on my own why. It was basically my big motivation to serve the city that I love. And like a lot of people, I've lost really close family and friends to suicide. And it really wasn't until that lived experience of having a cousin that I was close with, a mother who I helped her have children in life. No one saw it coming. No one saw it coming. And especially with one of them. And I learned that you just really never know what's going on with somebody, even when you're close with them. And that is why we have to keep building the agency for all of us to have access to services, and why I know I'm committed in my authority role with even my own team to really take some time to do balance. Yesterday's a great example. I started meetings at 7:30. I didn't go on my morning walk. I wasn't okay by the end of the afternoon, just was not okay. This morning I did my morning walk. I should be better. It's like those daily disciplines. No one's going to do it for you. You have to do it for yourself, but you need to be supported by those who you work with. So thank you for bringing it home in such a very honest, real way. I also choose to serve on a board, Trillium Family Services, that focuses on children and youth with mental health. The stigma is so real. And the more of us that come out about our own commitment to our own mental health, the better. Again, in my family, there's 8 children, 5 of us are still alive. And I would say the 5 of us that are alive are because we have our own daily reprieve of services that we do to take care of ourselves. And so it's a one day at a time commitment to our own serenity so that we can serve and be decent and also just sleep at night. I'm glad someone mentioned getting a good night's sleep. I have to work on that one. Anyway, this is just such an important stage of life that we're in right now. And I hope that in this year of so much reckoning, that mental health, which is at root of so much of our issues, continues to get the attention that it deserves. So many of our bigger issues that we talk about, the root cause is mental health. And that's, again, why it's so important that we take a breath today and really make space for this. So I appreciate you all for being here, for giving space for this important topic. I strongly encourage all city employees, talking to myself right now, to look into that app that was mentioned and really formalize the routine of our own mental health, and for everybody to provide space for one another so we can continue to take care. And thanks for also having us put our screens on. I'm a little bit of a stickler for that in the meetings I'm in. I ask for people to turn their cameras on if possible, because it's really important for us to see one another. Anyway, it was mentioned earlier, but it's not that Oregon suffers. We're the 51st state, that's last place, in a list from best to worst when it comes to mental health systems in the country. We're behind all states, including Washington, D.C. And so we have a higher prevalence of mental health and much lower access. That's the key part to care. So as a city and a state, we must do better. I urge Portlanders who need help to apply to the OHP, if possible, seek services at the county, and contact community-based practitioners for services on a sliding scale. And for all of us to support people that we care for to do the same. Anyway, thank you so much for centering us this morning on such an important and relevant topic all the time, but especially today. Thanks.
Commissioner Ryan. Courtney, were we able to get you situated?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your patience. So good morning, everyone. And thank you, the mayor and the commissioners for having us this morning. And I also want to thank Kathy Bless, Joel Michaels, and Taisha for all agreeing to speak this morning on behalf of mental health and well-being for the city and for city employees, which is important. City Strong, which is the in-house well-being program for all city employees. It's a relatively new program, but we have a mission to bring workplace opportunities and resources and support to all City of Portland employees, inspiring a passion for their health, their workplace, and their life. Having that balance when it comes to workplace balance is key. As a part of City Strong, we focus on the physical and mental and emotional health as well. So a part of our programming, we provide mindfulness classes, like Joel mentioned. We have mindfulness classes twice a week. We also have stretching and yoga classes as well. And then we also have webinars throughout the month as well. So this month, we will have a webinar on resiliency as well as fitness. And then we'll have a panel discussion on grief and loss later on this month as well for all city employees. And I also want to thank Taisha again for that wonderful speech, which is hard to follow. She's very passionate and also, determined to have a more human and person-centered workplace as well. So thank you for having us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Joel, Taisha, and Courtney, all of you for participating. And thanks to my colleagues for your thoughtful statements. It's now my pleasure on behalf of the Portland City Council to read a proclamation. Whereas the City of Portland takes pride in joining Americans throughout the country in recognizing May 2021 as Mental Health Month. And whereas the City of Portland affirms that taking care of one's mental health is equally important as taking care of one's physical health. Mental Health Month reminds us of the importance of our mental health, reflecting on the positive changes we would like in our lives and implementing new ways of being in the world. And whereas the City of Portland uplifts the necessity for operating from a person-centered lens that acknowledges the humanness of each individual, whether on staff or in the community, as beings made up of many different identities to include gender, ethnicity, mentality, spirituality, professionally, culturally, emotionally, who are deserving of dignity and respect. And whereas the City of Portland should empower staff through creating a balance between personal and professional life, promoting the centering of mental wellness, while also cultivating the creation of safe, supported, destigmatized, and inclusive spaces for people who experience mental health disabilities. And whereas the City of Portland recognizes the prevalence of individuals experiencing mental health disabilities and how those experiences impact a person's thinking, feelings, relationships, perceptions, and behavior and/or mood. And whereas the City of Portland commits to prioritizing the need for implementing trauma-informed approaches into our practices, policies, procedures, and processes to acknowledge the experience of trauma others have endured, while also seeking to operate in a way that does not re-traumatize individuals. And whereas the City of Portland encourages staff and community to refuel ourselves through utilizing tools, education, and resources offered to enable us to practice self-care and to center mental wellness. And whereas the City of Portland recognizes mental health is essential to everyone's overall health and well-being and commits to promoting mental health awareness. And whereas the City of Portland acknowledges that all Americans face challenges in life that can impact their mental health regardless of whether those challenges are evident, especially during a global pandemic. And whereas the City of Portland offers prevention alternatives as effective ways to reduce the burden of mental health disabilities. And whereas the City of Portland provides practical tools and resources that all people can use to improve their mental health and increase resiliency. And whereas the City of Portland understands mental health disabilities are real and prevalent in our nation and our city, and is committed to continued learning and support. And whereas the City of Portland regards effective treatment and support as critical for those experiencing mental health disabilities or conditions so that they can recover and lead full and productive lives. And whereas the City of Portland accepts responsibility to promote mental well-being, support prevention, and treatment efforts. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 2021 to be Mental Health Month in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you all. Okay, let's see. Last proclamation 303, certain item 303.
Proclaim May 2021 to be Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
Colleagues, today we're here to honor the history and contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Before we do, I want to recognize that Asian American and Pacific Islander are broad terms. Asian Americans encompass all of the continent of Asia. Pacific Islanders encompasses the island regions of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. Both represent a broad array of languages, ethnicities, and religious beliefs. 1 month, let alone one council session, truly isn't enough time to honor the immense cultural, civic, and economic contributions of the AAPI community to Portland. We need to keep in mind that our city, and frankly our entire country, continues to benefit off the labor of the AAPI community who helped build this country and continue to guide Portland to new heights. We also need to keep in mind the racism and hatred that the AAPI community faces to this very day. And indeed, just yesterday, once again, there was an attack on a member of this community here in this country. It's no surprise that this hatred, particularly in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, have led to a spike in hate and bias crimes. We need to be vigilant of this hatred. We also need to make sure that when we pass new ordinances or create new policies, that along with the various ethnic groups that make up the identity of our city, we center the AAPI community through a racial equity lens in the work that we do. Lastly, I want to recognize the members of my team who are AAPI, including Erico, Bobby, Allison, Angela, and Con, all valuable and integral parts of my team whose dedication and expertise continue making this city stronger and better. I want to thank you. I will pause before I read the proclamation and ask any of my colleagues if they would like to add anything at this point. Commissioner Matz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues. Let me begin by saying this. This May, during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we come together to recognize the history, achievement, and unmet needs of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders here in Portland. Asian people have been here in Oregon since even before we became a state. For example, the first group of Chinese immigrants arrived in the Oregon Territory as early as 1850. And our Asian ancestors helped make Portland the city we love so much today. Despite the contributions Asian Americans have made to our community, our Asian neighbors have endured a long history of discrimination. Of course, we all remember the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which banned Chinese immigration to these United States. And we must never forget that during World War II, in our own city, Portlanders of Japanese descent were rounded up and imprisoned at the Portland Expo Center. Even today, Asian American communities endure harassment and violence. I think this whole council is united in this statement. The violence against the Asian American community is wrong and it must end. While racism may have been a part of our city's past, racism must not be part of our community's future. That's why today this council stands with our Asian American and Pacific Islander neighbors in condemning and working to end these acts of violence. And there are other challenges which we must overcome too. The American dream remains out of reach for far too many Asian American families. That's why I'd like to conclude my comments today by acknowledging our community partners who support Portland's API community, especially Apano and ERCO, the Asian Family Center, the Chinese Consolidated Benevolence Association, the Vietnamese Community of Oregon, the Japanese American Society, and the Philippine American Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for the work that you do. You represent the best of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you for starting us off by acknowledging when you say Asian Pacific Islander, what a large part of the globe that encompasses. And I want to start off by also thanking the city employees who brought this proclamation forward. First, my heart and my thoughts are with the Indian and Indian American Portlanders whose families are so impacted by the recent surge of COVID cases in your home country. I also want to acknowledge Asian American Pacific Islander communities in our city and the metro region are critical fabric, culture, and success to Portland. As noted, for generations, Asian and Pacific Islanders have chosen Portland as their home. They've come here for various reasons, many times deep challenges. I know my lived experience was really heightened as a student at Roosevelt High School in the late 70s. That was the feeder school for the refugee community from Vietnam and Laos. And I'll never forget what it was like to welcome up to 300 to 400 new students, fellow students that were here coming from very difficult, challenging conditions. In spite of all these contributions successes, opportunities remain far out of reach for many AAPI families, and many face systemic barriers to justice, health, equity, and educational attainment and personal safety. There's no single story of the AAPI experience. AAPI Heritage Month is an opportunity to listen and learn from the diversity within the AAPI community and how deep these community connections are to all facets of US history. This year has been particularly painful for our AAPI communities, as has been mentioned, and my heart goes out to the hate crimes that continue to persist during this time of COVID. I want to end by just acknowledging how grateful I am that one of my brothers married a bride who's Hawaiian and Filipino, and for the two beautiful children and now their children that continue to enhance my life. And I'm just so grateful that that culture is a part of our family. Anyway, I'm grateful that we're here today, taking a time to acknowledge that we must look for opportunities to heal together to fight racism and xenophobia that exist in our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Rubio.
And thank you to Happy and Face and everyone for bringing forward this year's proclamation and for your work and commitment, not just this month, but every day to move the city of Portland to a more inclusive government. I'm happy that today we're honoring the contributions of AAPI communities, but we can't do this without acknowledging, as my colleagues have also done, the racist harm currently being inflicted upon AAPI communities here. The hard truth is that we must face is that this recent violence is built on a history of racism and discrimination toward and exploitation of Asian and Pacific Islanders in this country. And we know this racism was further stoked by past and current leaders, national leaders, who created conditions for these acts and these racist acts to become and actors to become emboldened and commit hate crimes across the United States, and including right here in Portland. So today, I want to honor that our region has developed in significant and critical ways from the physical and economic infrastructure built by Asian laborers, by the Asian AAPI community, whose histories are often disregarded and erased by earlier generations of Oregonians. And that's something that we still struggle with today. Asian Americans and Pacific Islander heritage is a part of America. It is American heritage. And as a daughter of and granddaughter of farm workers, I'm tremendously grateful to see these communities and grateful for the work of these communities and their vast civic, economic, and cultural contributions, their rich histories, and tremendous leadership and advocacy that our state and city has benefited and prospered from. I'm inspired by their stories and contribution, and they have literally shaped our way of life here in Oregon today. And there are many ways we can also support this community and take action every day, not just once a year. Things like supporting Asian American and Pacific Islander-owned businesses, giving to AAPI organizations and causes, and attending educational events by culturally specific organizations that serve these communities, and participating and making an effort, a true effort, and to do our
Oh, I think Commissioner Rubio froze up. Or is it just me?
No, it's not just you. I was wondering if it was just me.
Every day to ensure that we're doing the best to move the city forward towards justice and inclusion. And I'm grateful to work here with people who feel the same way. So thank you again to everyone for what we are honoring today and for holding our city accountable to its values.
Thanks, Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope that the recorded version got all your words, Commissioner Rubio, because you cut out for a little bit, but then you came back at the end. But sometimes online you hear it. I just wanted to start by really appreciating the introduction of this resolution, and by saying it is really important that we continue the work that we've done since this pandemic began, of really centering API businesses to ensure that they have access to resources so that they aren't continually devastated by COVID. We all know that the Asian Pacific Islander community was hit first, and they were hit hardest, and they continue to have a very slow recovery because of lack of access to banks and credit unions and some other supports that other communities may have. I always want to remember and never forget Executive Order 9066. And Executive Order 966 authorized the military to exclude any or all persons from areas of the United States designated as military area. Although the order did not identify any particular group, it was designed to remove and eventually used to incarcerate Japanese quote-unquote aliens and American citizens of Japanese descent. I think this is important because what all communities of color and API communities specifically has suffered under the last federal administration for 4 years was an outright target by our federal government on our right to exist. And so it's important to remember how a disconnected government can be lulled into a sense of security, as can people who believe that government is always right. It is important that we acknowledge and remember that executive order because, again, it didn't say exactly go remove Japanese people, but it was exactly what the goal and intent was. And we know how that played out. Racism is rampant in this country, and even if we have presidents and people in Congress who can't actually see that racism is real and clear, it is our responsibility as Portlanders to actually have no tolerance, zero tolerance for racism and racist behavior and actions. And we have to make sure that our community safety system protects all of us equally. And nobody should be fearful of what happens when I call for aid, a first responder who will show up and what their attitude will be towards me and people that look like me. So I am pleased to be with my colleagues today and honoring our API community. And I know that we have been in this struggle together for a long time, and we will continue to be partners in the struggle for equality and equity for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. And with that, colleagues, I will read the proclamation on behalf of the City Council. Whereas Portland is home to more than 45,000 community members who trace their roots to the Pacific Islands in Asia, and whereas the Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, and Southeast, South, and East Asian American communities are proud of their diversity and draw strength from their rich cultures and traditions. And whereas Portland's AAPI members come from a complex and diverse mix of many languages, ethnicities, and faiths, including Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, and Sikhism. And whereas the U.S. has experienced a 150% rise in anti-Asian hate crimes, with disproportionate numbers against women in the last year, with at least 3,800 incidents reported. And whereas anti-Asian hate crimes were spurred on by reference to the COVID-19 virus as the, quote, Chinese virus, unquote, Wuhan virus, quote, unquote, and Kung flu, in place of the scientific name for the virus. And whereas City Council declared the City of Portland a welcoming city, a sanctuary city, and an inclusive city for all Resolution 37277 adopted by the Council on March 2nd of 2017. And whereas Portland City Code Section 23.01.010 states that it is the policy of the City of Portland to eliminate discrimination based on race, religion, color, sex, marital status, family status, national origin, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or source of income. Such discrimination poses a threat to the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Portland and menaces the institutions and foundations of our community. And whereas Portland City Council in 2016 adopted Code Section 3.131.010, establishing a new Portlander Policy Commission to advise the city on policies and practices to integrate immigrant and refugee communities' voices and needs into the provision of city services, city decision-making, and civic engagement in Portland. And whereas City Council acknowledges the challenges faced by all Portlanders during the COVID-19 crisis, while specifically people of Asian and American and Asian Pacific Islander descent have been subject to hate crimes, we acknowledge that Black and Indigenous communities are disproportionately impacted by the highest infection and fatality rate due to the health disparities perpetrated by systemic racism. And whereas Portland City Council believes that all immigrants and refugees are critical additions to the social and economic well-being of the city. And whereas on June 24th, 2020, the new Portlanders Policy Commission, Portland United Against Hate, and APANO presented a proclamation condemning anti-Asian crimes to City Council. And whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is an opportunity for all individuals and organizations to recognize important AAPI contributions, development, and defense for our country. as well as the cultural, civic, and economic life of Portland for over 150 years. And whereas Portland, through dialogue with representatives from Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, continues to address the needs and concerns of its community members and remains committed to seek solutions to problems such as prejudice, discrimination, and violence. And now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim May 2021 to be Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you. And Commissioner Hardesty, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask if we could suspend the rules and allow our affinity group that prepared testimony. We may have just skipped that part if there was any invited testimony.
If I did, I apologize. Yes. Do we have?
We do have representatives here that are all prepared to present to us.
Terrific. I'm sorry I missed that. Thank you.
We all did, Mayor. It's not just you.
Good. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Well, Ohio gozaimasu, and good morning, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Rubio, Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Mapps, and Commissioner Ryan. Greetings to Pacific Islander and Asian American community members, leaders, and city employees who are joining us today. Commissioner Rubio, I remember all those years ago when you and I worked together on a joint Japanese American and Latino community event for the Japanese American Citizens League. And also Commissioner Mapps and Commissioner Hardesty, I want to thank you for mentioning the incarceration of 120,000 Japanese Americans and Executive Order 9066. If that happened today, my family and I would be forcibly removed from our home and shipped off to American concentration camps. For the record, my name is Jeff Selby. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the communications manager for the Office of Equity and Human Rights, lead public information officer at the city's Emergency Coordination Center, member of HAPI, the city's Hapa Asian and Pacific Islander Deep Affinity Group, and proud son of Michiko Selby, a scrappy 88-year-old immigrant from Tokyo, Japan. I'd like to first acknowledge this National Day of Awareness for missing and murdered Native women and girls, our unwavering support for Black lives, and our acknowledgement of Mental Health Awareness Month. I would also like to recognize the Emergency Coordination Center's Joint Volunteer Information Center, headed by Regina Ingebeyer, for their assistance to so many immigrants, refugees, Black and Indigenous people, and people of color. This month's celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage comes at a very difficult time for our communities. Just last night in San Francisco, 2 elderly Asian women were stabbed in broad daylight as they waited for their bus. Despite these daily tragedies, the murders in Atlanta and Indianapolis and the surge in anti-Asian hate crimes around our country, our communities are mourning and have remained resilient. Targeted hate and racism are nothing new for us, but we are buoyed by the support from our fellow communities of color and allies. On behalf of the HAPI Affinity Group, I thank you for taking time to honor our Pacific Islander and Asian American communities today. Domo arigato. Up next, I'd like to introduce Shana Hobbs from the Filipino American City Employees of Portland, or FACE. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for having us here today at Council. My name is Shana Hobbs. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the chair of the Filipino American City Employees Affinity Group. So since I'm last to speak, I'll probably be echoing a lot of the sentiments that were spoken here today. Thank you for setting aside time to honor and celebrate Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It's an important time to look back and reflect on the important contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, celebrate our heritage and cultures, and stand in solidarity with us. As mentioned, there has been a sharp increase in violence towards Asians. And I also read about these recent attacks in San Francisco, and I believe there was one in Baltimore yesterday. Well, it's easy to feel helpless about these events. You don't have to, and there are actions that we can take to try and curb the hate that's happening all around our country. The Filipino American City Employees Affinity Group has donated part of our annual budget to Holoback to support their bystander intervention trainings that they have developed in partnership with Asian Americans Advancing Justice. These trainings are an important tool for interrupting discrimination, harassment, and violence in our community. We ask that you take action this month by signing up for a bystander intervention or conflict de-escalation training with Holoback. You'll come out of the training not only a stronger ally for AAPI people, but for all Black, Indigenous, and people of color who may experience discrimination and harassment. And I'll share a link in the chat after this. I also invite you to take time this month to read books and watch movies or documentaries or listen to podcasts that bring to light the unique hardships and triumphs that AAPI people have experienced throughout history, and also celebrate our, our creativity and all of the positive things that we have to offer, in addition to learning about the hardships that we've experienced. Support AAPI artists and creators, and continue to support AAPI-owned businesses that we are so fortunate to have in Portland. They've been hit particularly hard by the pandemic, and they need your support. And to all members of the AAPI community who may have ever felt like you aren't Asian enough or Pacific Islander enough, maybe because you don't speak the language of your motherland or because you don't look a certain way, I just want you to know that you're seen and you are enough, and there's always a space for you, at Hoppy and Face. And to everyone else, please remember that the AAPI community is not a monolith. We have a broad array of experiences, cultures, and identities. And thank you for this time.
Thank you, Shana. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you. Commissioner Mapps.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, before we move on from this topic, I'd like to have an indulgence and plug an upcoming event which might be of interest to many Portlanders. Tomorrow, the Japanese American Museum of Oregon celebrates its grand opening. It'll be a virtual event at 5 o'clock. That's Thursday, May 6th at 5 o'clock. If you Google Japanese American Museum of Oregon, you can find the link. Should be fascinating. It'll give us a real opportunity to continue the celebration that we're gathered here today for. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Appreciate it. All right, thank you. That was a great presentation. We'll go back to the regular agenda. The next item is item 309, please.
Authorize the Emergency Coordination Center to provide sponsorships to community-based organizations during city disaster declarations.
Colleagues, the city's Emergency Coordination Center has been activated for over a year now for the COVID response. Much effort has been focused on supporting the Portland communities hit hardest by the pandemic, which are the Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, immigrants and refugee communities, and people with disabilities. The Joint Volunteer Information Center, JVIC, or JVIC, has led much of this community work in the partnership with community-based organizations. The work is expected to continue well into the recovery phase. Staff from the JVIC and the community leaders are here today to talk briefly about that work and to ask Council to create some grant rules that are specific to emergencies. These rules will help expedite assistance to communities through CVOs during declared states of emergency. This is an opportunity for us to improve our response to COVID and also in future disasters by working in partnership with local community-based organizations. Regina Ingabira of the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management is here to present on this item. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners, for having us today. My name is Regina Ingabire. I'm Community Outreach Manager at the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management and also co-lead of JVIC. Before I start, I would like to give you a brief introduction or brief background about the JVIC program. The Joint Volunteer Information Center, JVIC, was created in March 2020 in partnership between the ECC and Multnomah County Operations Center. We began distributing cleaning and hygiene resources to community members experiencing economic difficulties due to the pandemic. The resources were distributed using a model which paired small and medium-sized community-based organizations, CBOs, with the city staff, who we refer to as JEVIC advocates. The CBOs did not need to apply to participate in the program and did not complete any form to receive resources from us. The model was intended to be a zero barrier program to assist underserved communities. And I think as city, we can take pride just knowing that we have assisted so many community-based organizations who otherwise wouldn't have a chance to work with the city. And currently we serve over 75 community organizations who serve primarily immigrants, refugees, Black, Indigenous, or other communities of color or people with disabilities. Since the inception of JEVIC, we have supplied thousands of household hygiene and cleaning resources to so many community members who needed help. Also, I'd like to kind of give you an overview how the JEVIC model works. So currently we have 9 JEVIC advocates from different bureaus. It's a very diverse team with shared lived experiences with the communities we serve, and we're able to provide culturally appropriate and timely response to our communities. And this is very much appreciated by the communities we serve when they see the team that's serving them also that looks like them. And they wanted to share or give credit to City of Portland for keeping having diverse team. Also, I want to share that our JEVIC staff, we connect with the community leaders on a weekly basis to check in. We take their orders and also offer information about city resources and programs, or sometimes we support CBOs to apply for external funding opportunities whenever they become available. I'd also like to highlight that through this model, we have been able to build relationships and earn trust in the community we serve, and also increase the city's presence and commitment to communities' needs, especially those served by small emerging grassroots organizations that otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to work with the city or never worked with the city before. So literally we have made this program more accessible to the communities who need it most. Why are we asking for sponsorship grants? Sponsorship grants, which will come in the form of non-competitive grants, will help us, the city, to move quickly during disasters to support communities in need. The funds will help to build or strengthen CBO's capacity to improve emergency relief to the communities during emergencies. And I also want to highlight that through the program, we have almost on a quarterly basis, we do conduct focus groups with these CBOs to gather feedback about the program and how we can improve our services. During those focus groups, some of CBOs highlight the need for cultural specific products, which our program could not provide. Providing direct sponsorship grants will allow CBOs not only to buy cultural specific and local products to meet their community needs, but also these dollars will be reinvested in locally owned BIPOC community businesses. And also through these CBOs be able to work with us directly, it will increase their visibility and credibility to potential external funders once they know that these CBOs have a track record of working with the City of Portland. And also these funds will be distributed to existing JEVIC CBOs, starting with those in Tier 1 or what we call small and grassroots organizations. Our JEVIC team will support these CBOs with any help they need to navigate the city procurement process. Technically, we'll be providing technical assistance to these CBOs and to help them be on their feet going forward. And we have invited 2 community leaders to give their testimony after working with our program since last year. I'd like to invite Sabrina Wilson, the Executive Director of Rosewood Initiative.
Hello, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Hardesty, Commissioner Rubio, Commissioner Mapps, and Commissioner Ryan. My name is Sabrina Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rosewood Initiative. Rosewood is a nonprofit organization in Outer East Portland that works towards community-driven solutions for a healthier neighborhood where our neighbors can thrive together. Our community center sits at the intersection of 162nd and Stark and within the zip code 97233. This zip code has been the hardest hit by the coronavirus in the metropolitan area. The impact of the coronavirus on our community has been multifaceted. And as an organization who has always adapted to the needs of our community, we have had to be increasingly flexible to respond to the many ways in which our community has been impacted. We are currently hosting weekly vaccine clinics at our center to ensure the people of East County have lower barriers to get vaccinated. And we have provided direct support such as weekly food boxes and household rental assistance. We have provided small business grants and over 500 digital devices and over 1,000 internet assistance cards. This is just a snapshot of our work, but much of it could not have been done without the City of Portland. And JVIC has been a dynamic partner in our organization's rapid response. They have actively listened and engaged to provide Rosewood the resources that our community needs and connect us with relevant opportunities. As Rosewood continues to discern what the community's needs are, support that allows us to adapt to those needs is critical. The road to recovery will be a long one, but we look forward to and value having JVIC as a reliable and consistent partner in this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. I also like to invite Mark Jackson, who is Executive Director of REAP. Mark?
Yes, good morning, Mayor Wheeler and members of the council. My name is Mark Jackson, co-founder and executive director for the REAP organization, a local nonprofit multicultural youth leadership organization here in the city of Portland. I want to publicly acknowledge the great work of the JVIC and how thrilled I am of their proposed sponsorship grant program for CBOs. It is a culturally responsive approach to assisting the community in times of crises. The city advocates have played a critical role over the past year in listening to CBOs as we administer household assistance to our most vulnerable families adversely impacted by COVID-19. The city of Portland has an opportunity to further humanize the process of emergency management by empowering CBOs who have the established trust and respect of the community to respond in a more efficient and culturally responsive way. Having the autonomy and discretion to act in real time is a potential game changer that will provide the necessary assistance to families with exceptional need during this persistent and unapologetic pandemic. Much of the process up to this point is limited by the supply order and delivery process that are not aligned with the immediate and unique needs of our vulnerable families. The sponsorship grant program will change these outcomes. It is my sincere hope that this council will support this funding model and continue providing unparalleled leadership that is both collaborative and culturally responsive to the BIPOC community. Hence, sending a clear message: we serve our citizens with empathy and, more importantly, with dignity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty, I want to make sure, does that complete the presentation before I call on anybody? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here. And I apologize that I didn't call on you earlier. I'm sorry. Under all my papers, I lost my run of show. So please accept my sincere apology. And we're really, really glad that you can make the time to be here today and share your perspective. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to publicly thank Regina for her incredible leadership with the JVIC. It has been a real game changer when we see the city adapting to the needs of its people as compared to the expectation that the people will adapt to the needs of the government. I am so proud of the work that you've done. You've served over 70 community-based organizations, and I would say that many of them have never, ever worked with the city of Portland before. And if they wanted to, wouldn't have known how to. And what you've done is actually build community during a time when people are stressed out, tapped out, and looking for any source of support. I really applaud the work. I am 100% behind this grant proposal. One of the things we hear over and over again is how darn long it takes us to get money out the door after we've made a decision. And so I appreciate the creativity that you've used to develop this grant program. And I look forward to seeing some of the organizations who never saw the city as a partner actually being able to be in line to get additional resources as we come out of this pandemic and start looking at rebuilding a more just, equitable, and transparent city. So I thank all of you for your work, what you've done so far, and what you will continue to do with this support. Thank you.
Yes, hello, Regina, thank you for being here. I look forward to supporting this. I just have a question because this is a joint operation with the county. And I think the crisis is multiple that we've been involved with has reminded everybody that there's two major jurisdictions serving our constituents. And I just wanted to ask this, has the county's Emergency Operations Center proposed a similar practice? If so, is there a proposal not to exceed a certain grant amount? I just want to know if there's parallel systems operating with the county at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a great question. Actually, we created the joint Volunteer Information Center together, but when it came to funding, the City of Portland has been the sole funder. So we are not talking about parallel projects right here. We are asking the City of Portland this to be a unique program going forward.
Thank you for answering that question. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Keelan, do we have public testimony on this item?
No one is on the line for this item.
All right, very good, colleagues. This is an emergency ordinance. Thank you all for a fantastic presentation. Unless there's any other business, Keelan, please call the roll.
Ryan.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
I was launching away, right? You have too many screens. Anyway,
you got a chance to practice. This is going to be a lot better than ours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Regina, Sabrina, and it's good to see you, Mark. It's great to have all of you here today. I'm really happy to support this item. And thank you, ECC and JVIC city employees for your critical work and energy that you've been putting into this emergency response this past year. I just really hope we're learning so much from what it's like to truly be forced to collaborate. And thank you to all the community-based organizations that have helped us in reaching our most vulnerable community members. Your testimony today, Sabrina and Mark, really brought that home. Our partnerships with these CBOs during these times of crisis is an excellent example of government and public service coming together. I'm proud to entrust ECC and JVIC to get resources out the door fast in times of crisis. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I also want to say it's a pleasure to meet you virtually, Sabrina Wilson. I look forward to getting to know you because Rosewood Initiative is one of my favorite community-based programs in East Portland. So I appreciate your leadership in stepping in. And Regina, I've already said how much I really applaud the incredible work that you've done over the last year, the vision, the compassion, the empathy that the entire team shows over and over and over again really makes the city proud. When you step out in this role, we send the best that the city of Portland has to offer, and I am very happy to vote aye.
I'd like to thank staff and the community for that informative presentation and this very important work. I vote aye.
Rubio.
Regina, thank you so much for your leadership and your great work. And Sabrina and Mark, thank you for your very important comments. People turn to those they trust most in emergency situations and to the organizations and people who know them and include them and are from the same communities and also treat them with respect and dignity. And many community-based organizations hold the trust of these communities in these ways, and they know these communities very well. And for too long, community-based organizations have been filling the gaps in equitable services for government. And in this case, are already doing some of the work without being compensated. These organizations deserve our respect and our gratitude, and deserve to be compensated in the form of a formal partnership for their expertise and their time. You can tell I very much am passionate about this kind of work. So thank you to Mayor Wheeler and the ECC and JVIC staff for recognizing the value of these important partnerships and for putting resources to those values and for bringing these grants forward. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Well, this is fantastic. Obviously, I support it or I wouldn't bring it. Thank you all for your hard work. Thank you for your commitment to making this work. This is solid. Thanks. I vote aye, and the ordinance is adopted. Well done. Next up, 310, please.
Accept bid of Ballard Marine and Construction LLC for the Columbia Boulevard Wastewater Treatment Plant Outfall Diffuser Improvements Project for $2,599,975.
This is a procurement report for a Bureau of Environmental Services construction project. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Maps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, I'm not sure if we have any staff here who are prepared to discuss this project, and I didn't want to preempt the run of show if something else is going on. But in my time as being a commissioner in charge of a couple of infrastructure bureaus, this is one of the most remarkable projects I've ever seen. I just wanted to invite staff to remind us about some of the details and some of the skills and some of the technology we need in order to get this thing done. And I'm not sure who from staff is that you, Darren, or
Kathleen?
Hi. Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Kathleen Brennis-Marua, the Interim Chief Procurement Officer. With me are Philip McCorman, the Project Manager with the Bureau of Environmental Services, as well as a representative from the contractor, Dalen Hutton. We are here to recommend authorization to enter into a contract with Ballard Marine and Construction, LLC, for the Columbia Boulevard Wastewater Treatment Plant's Outfall Diffuser Improvements Project. As Commissioner Mapp said, Phil is here and has a brief presentation about the project's scope. So I'll let him give his presentation, and then I'll follow with a summary of the procurement process. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. Okay, good morning, Mayor Wheeler and members of council. My name is Philip McCormick. So I work with the Bureau of Environmental Services in the Project Management Office, and I'm the project manager for this project. As Kathleen stated, she asked me to present a few slides to refamiliarize members of council with the project. So bear with me if any of this is repetitive, as most of this was presented to council back in January of this year. Do we have any slides? I think that was going to be council clerk was going to put those up. So I think we can go to the next slide. So here's a location map of the project. The area highlighted in green is where the Columbia Boulevard Wastewater Treatment Plant is. It's in North Portland off of Columbia Boulevard. The two areas that are highlighted in red represent the project location. So this is off the north side of Hayden Island in the Columbia River. After wastewater is treated at the plant, the effluent travels through large pipes to the two main outfall structures that are in the Columbia River. The outfall pipes diffuse the effluent into the river and back into the environment. And the plant has the capacity to discharge up to 450 million gallons per day of treated effluent. Next slide. So here, this is an aerial of the project site looking north and west along the Columbia River. You can see Hayden Island on the left and the railroad bridge that crosses the river there between the two outfalls. So outfalls 1 and 2 are circled in yellow and are separated by about 1,000 feet. The blue-green part of the image is an overlay of a bathymetric survey that was completed in 2018. So these surveys help us to map the underwater features of the water body. And here you can see the riverbed form sand waves in and around the outfalls, and lighter colors represent shallower depths of water. Next slide. So this is a slide that shows outfall 3. I did not include outfall 1. I think I presented that in January, but conditions are similar. So the top figure shows the profile of the outfall, which is buried below the riverbed. The buried pipe is highlighted in pink for clarity. The outfall is 255 feet long and has 18 riser pipes that extend up through the riverbed. Each riser has its own diffuser port, and those are highlighted in green, so you can see them. These are the ports that discharge the effluent from the plant back into the river. The image on the lower half of the slide is the same bathymetric survey from 2018, but this time looking directly over the outfall. You can see the dimples in the sand at the diffuser port locations indicating flow from the ports. The orange line in the top figure shows you where the riverbed elevation was at the time the survey was complete. And so you can see that in the area I circled, those 6 diffuser pipes are buried, and there's no indication that those ports are discharging. The riverbed is constantly shifting on the Columbia River, and we are scheduled to do another bathymetric survey prior to construction. But the trend over time has shown gradual buildup of sediment in and around the outfalls. And the risks to the plant are that we have the flow is reduced through the outfalls, and that could lead to an increased risk of sediment buildup within the 84-inch pipes. These deficiencies do not allow the plant outfall pipes to function at full capacity. So our primary objective for this project is to restore full discharge capacity through the outfalls. This will be accomplished by raising the diffuser ports and replacing them with new ports that meet specific hydraulic performance requirements that'll take us into the future. The new diffuser ports are shown colored in black in the top figure of the slide, so you can see how they're being raised up. These modifications will reduce the probability that the ports are buried and allow the outfalls to operate at full discharge capacity. And this will improve dilution performance, ensuring that the city is able to meet regulatory requirements for water quality standards into the future. Next slide. So this project is subject to the city subcontractor equity program and its monthly compliance reporting requirements. Due to the specialty nature of this work and the fact that most of it is underwater and requires divers, we had concerns early about meeting the city's aspirational goals. And we strategized internally with procurement services for ways to improve outreach and participation on the project. And I even reached out to the Port of Portland to get some input on their approach to participation, because they have a lot of experience with marine and port type projects. In the end, we decided that a targeted approach would be the best approach for this project. So before the project was advertised, we contacted as many COVID certified contractors, any contractor that had experience working in or around water, to make sure that they were aware of the project, and to talk to them and let them know that what opportunities existed. And these contractors were all emailed the advertisement when it became available. Contractor associations were also contacted about the project to ask for their assistance in distributing the advertisements, and member contractors, as we know that they understand their member contractors and who maybe this work may apply to. The project is also subject to the city's workforce training and hiring program. It's a program administered by procurement services and monitored monthly by project staff. And obviously this is to maximize apprenticeship and employment opportunities for minorities, women, and economically disadvantaged workers in the construction trades. Next slide. So our schedule, bids opened on March 16th. Notice of intent to award was issued to Ballard Marine on March 25th. And construction is scheduled to take place during the project's permitted in-water work window. The permitted window starts in October 1, and we have to be finished with construction by the end of February 2022. That's all I have, so I'll turn it over to Kathleen unless there are any questions.
I have a quick question, if I may.
Yeah.
Philip, there's so many specialized skills involved here. Do you have any sense of how many African Americans, or what percentage of the commercial diving industry is made up of African Americans?
I don't know that personally. I did chat with Ballard Marine a little bit about their approach to the project, how they staff these, and it's a pretty limited crew. So they have a 7-member dive team that pretty much does all of the work, and one journeyman operator. They'll have a crane to deal with moving material to and from for the divers. But it's a 7-man crew, and they basically rotate through diving. And part of the issue with the diving and the rules around diving is that they all have to be certified divers in order to not only to work down below as a diver, but to also manage the air that the divers that are down below the surface will need. So and that's really going to be the crew for the entire project. So it's a pretty limited scope of work and highly specialized. I did ask, because the participation is so low, I asked, so what about women divers and apprentice opportunities? And there are only 40 or 50 divers in the Pacific Northwest Union, and so obviously they're covering every job up and down the Pacific Northwest. So that's even pretty limited, and there are only 4 of those that are women.
Thank you, Philip. That's consistent with my research too. I'm deeply concerned about our equity goals here, and I did a little bit of research to see, what percentage of the commercial diving industry is made up of African Americans, and the number I found was less than 1%, which is frustrating. And I hope that projects like this create an opportunity to bring that number up. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Ryan, then Commissioner Hardesty, then Commissioner Rubio.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Philip, for being here today. And thank you, Kathleen. My question is actually about the estimate range for this project was 5.5 million and the confidence level was high. And I see that we're looking to award this at basically 2.6 million, which is a 47% over estimation. I'm just curious, how do you explain that gap?
Yeah, we did debrief with the consulting engineer once bids came in. I think it was a surprise to everybody. And so they put the estimate together for BES. There were a few things that we found as we compared the estimates, the estimate to bids. One was admittedly, they feel like they might have been a little bit too conservative, not understanding the technical difficulty of the work. So there were estimates for escalation and contingency in the contract that were probably a lot higher than they should have been. And then also there was some double up in contingency because they had some contingency within the direct construction, which is typically where you won't have that. So that was another thing that added to some of the costs. The other was right before the project bid, we got word that the valve manufacturer that we had specified in the contract was having some manufacturing and shipping delays due to COVID, and they were expecting a seven-month lead time for valves. So we had to pull that portion of the contract last minute, just before this advertised, and that was $590,000 worth of just materials that came out of the contract right at the start. The other was schedule. We did have some discussions with Ballard, and part of it was to gauge their comfort level with their estimate or their bid. And what they're seeing was different from what the engineer saw in terms of being able to complete the project early. We have a 5-month window to complete the work, and Ballard Marine thinks they can complete the work 2 months early. So there's a big savings in labor and equipment, which is a big expense on the project. And then the estimate also had some more subcontracted work than what we're seeing. The reality is, and obviously there's markup on that subcontracted work that would account for some of that additional money.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rubio.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Hardesty. I apologize. Then Commissioner Rubio.
No worry. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan, for that question. That was one of my questions as well, but the answer really confused me. Based on the document that I have, the estimate that went out for bid was we thought this would cost $5 million, right? And your bid came in. So my understanding that your bid is 47.27% under the estimate. So your bid is less than what we anticipated we would pay for this service. Is that correct?
Correct.
It didn't sound like the answer you gave to Commissioner Ryan, so that's what.
Oh, yeah, I guess I was trying to explain the differences between, when we debriefed after bids came in, the differences between what we had in our estimate versus what came in the bids.
Thank you. So my other question does really have to do with the really poor aspirational goals that we've achieved in this contract. And as I looked at some of the subcontracts, I'm not a diver. I used to be married to one. I don't know if that counts. I'm not a diver, but as I look at some of the work that's being subcontracted out, I am curious as to why somebody would have to be a diver in order to, say, remove, hauling contaminated soil or many of the other specific pieces of work that's been put out for subcontract. The city is committed to actually not just aspiring, but achieving our goals. And as I look at the breakdown of work, I see opportunities where there are people of color contractors that could do work that would not require them to be in the water.
Sure.
And so I am very concerned that we say one thing and we actually contract with people who don't actually meet our goals.
Yeah, and I can't comment as to how many subcontract bids any of the prime contractors received. And whether they received other bids from minority contractors for these portions of the work. It sounds, talking to Ballard, and again, these were brief conversations, but it did sound like they searched through the COVID database for certified contractors based on under every trade of work they could locate, and did put a request out. And these were the subcontractors that reached back to them to provide a price. So yeah, as far as the hauling, I know there's that maybe there's an opportunity for us to pick that up if testing comes back that we don't have contaminated material. Maybe there's an opportunity to get a certified contractor to do the hauling. One of the concerns is that we don't know if the material is going to come back or hazardous, and so there are special requirements for haulers with hazardous materials.
So I appreciate that. And of course we all know that only 20% of minority and women-owned businesses are certified with the state. So even if they are not going to get extra points by using the co-bid process, there are other subcontract opportunities that don't require co-bid certification. And so in my mind, if someone was really intentional, there are many ways to achieve our aspirational goals. And if we continue to allow companies to skirt what we say our values are, then we will continue to get contracts that look like this. Thank you.
Commissioner Rubio.
I share Commissioner Hardesty's desire to see staff think more creatively about how we reach more diverse contractors. I also want to recognize, I know that this is really specialized work, and I try to carefully evaluate the contracts as unique and important work needed by our bureaus, but also that, there are economic opportunities that also move us toward a more inclusive economy as a city. And at this time, it will be hard for me to support this bid as is, because this particular gap seems significant and larger than the others that I've seen come through since being on council. But the question I have is and I'm learning too, is Ballard willing to, and is there room for Ballard to revisit their plans for subcontracting to work with minority contractors or partnering with minority contractor organizations to meet the goal or get closer to the goal?
Yeah, and I think I'd probably want Kathleen to maybe to weigh in on that. Obviously, we have some procurement rules where we have to work within, and they have to work within. But maybe Kathleen can chime in on that topic.
Yes, thank you, Philip. And I apologize. I'm keeping my camera off. I've been kicked out of the meeting twice, so want to make sure that doesn't happen again. There is an opportunity, and procurement services can work with Ballard to see what additional subcontracting opportunities there are. Any contractor, at any time can increase the utilization that they've presented. I can tell you that, procurement did a thorough review of Ballard's good faith efforts, and we confirmed that Ballard conducted significant outreach and found that they subcontracted to all the certified firms in the areas of work where there were certified firms that submitted bids. And in those areas work that have been subcontracted to non-certified firms, they also did and reach out to those firms that were available, and they did not receive any bids despite their efforts. But it is an area that procurement can continue to work with Ballard to see what is possible, before the contract gets started and while the work is being performed.
Commissioner Hardesty, you had a question?
Yes, I had another question. Thank you for that information. I'm actually curious if procurement has a standard good faith effort process. Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a pre-bid conversation? What is it? What does a aspirational effort look like that we check off on?
So our subcontractor equity program requires that contractors be able to demonstrate to us that they contacted firms, and whether that is through a phone call or written written email, they need to demonstrate to us that in fact contact was made. And if they don't receive a bid, to explain, provide for us an explanation of any feedback that was received, and also to continue to search certified firms until they get at least 3 written bids from certified firms where there are, the certified firms available in those areas of work.
And my last question, does procurement follow up with the firms that have been quote unquote reached out to find out the reasons behind the lack of applying to be a subcontractor?
We do follow up, and many times the reasoning being that they have too much, they're at capacity and are unable to perform the work within the schedule that's required. And then, there are, for this particular contract, I don't have the specific reasonings that were provided.
I can add something to that. During my outreach, I had contacted a COVID certified contractor that had the qualifications to bid this as a prime contractor. Unfortunately, the only in the area, or not in the area, the only I could find was out of Ventura, California, Harbor Offshore. They did attend the pre-bid. They seemed pretty interested in the job, but obviously they did not submit a a qualification statement to get qualified to bid as a prime. The follow-up with them was that, they were contractors local, they're coming from, out of state, so that they just didn't feel like they had that advantage.
Thank you. Of course, this continues to be an ongoing conversation with procurement, big picture, but also a conversation with especially bureaus that provide infrastructure improvement. We spend a lot of money in contracts, and we have lofty goals that I expect us to meet. And I expect us to be creative, and I expect us to not continue to say, well, there are laws that we have to follow. Yes, there are laws that we have to follow, but that doesn't mean that we cannot find creative solutions. We need to be developing a pipeline, and we need to have a sense of urgency because there are many communities, contractors of color, and women contractors who have been devastated by COVID. And if we continue to move at the pace the city has for the last 30 years, we will 30 years from now have the same outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. If there are no further questions on this, this is a procurement report. I'll entertain a motion if that's the will of the council.
I move that we vote on this.
I'll second the report. So we have a motion from Commissioner Mapps. I'm seconding. Any further discussion? Commissioner Hardesty?
That was leftover, Mayor.
Okay. Please call the roll, Keelan.
Ryan?
Aye.
Hardesty?
No.
Mapps?
Aye.
Rubio?
No.
Wheeler?
Aye. The report is accepted. Next item, 311.
Amend Hearings Office Code to update and clarify procedures.
City's Code Hearings Office is the central location within the city to resolve disputes through a legal process known as quasi-judicial administrative hearings. Title 22 governs the procedures used in those hearings. Various provisions in Title 22 need to be updated or clarified to address changes and improvements to the procedures and policies of the Code Hearings Office. The Chief Hearings Officer is present today to provide council with a summary of the changes and to answer any questions about the intention behind the proposed amendments. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor, thank you for introducing this ordinance on behalf of the Hearings Office. Commissioners, thank you for considering our request to update sections of Title 22. As the mayor just indicated, I'm William Guzman, and I serve as the city's Chief Hearings Officer. I have a few brief comments to make, and we'll reserve most of the time for any questions you may have about the updates we're requesting. As mentioned by the mayor, Title 22 establishes the Portland Code Hearings Office as a central location within the city for the resolution of disputes between a bureau taking enforcement action and members of the public. Under Title 22, the Hearings Office is charged with providing a fast, fair, and impartial adjudication of alleged city code violations. To this end, the Hearings Office is committed to transparency, rule of law, procedural legitimacy, and removing barriers to accessing our services. We really want the rules to be easy to understand and use simple language to follow, because you really shouldn't need an attorney when attending one of our hearings. Specifically, the proposed amendments seek to address the Hearings Office's new electronic case management system, delete reference to filing fee requirements, explicitly authorize the hearings officer to postpone hearings due to city closures or emergencies that impact our ability to carry out our services, to remove gender-specific language, to correct typographical errors, and make minor style edits to promote consistency throughout Title 22. Notably, the city invested in a new case management system to update the one that has been in use since 2006. This new system allows members of the public and city enforcement officers to request a hearing 24/7 with just a computer and internet access, and real-time access to the file contents as that evidence is uploaded by the parties. We anticipate that in a couple of weeks, we will go live with Title 22 code enforcement cases, and we've begun using the system for Title 22 appeals. I think it's important to note that although we're moving into an electronic format, we are continuing to accept hard copies of evidence and hearing requests for anyone who doesn't have access to a computer and internet. That's all I have. Thank you for your time. And of course, I'm available to answer any questions or concerns about the proposed updates.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one is on the call for this item.
All right, thank you, William. That was very clear and straightforward on this largely technical matter. Please call the roll. This is an emergency ordinance.
Ryan,
Thank you, William. Great report. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
Thank you, William. Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thanks, William. 312, please.
Authorize Bureau of Transportation to acquire certain temporary rights necessary for construction of the Safe Routes to School signalized crossings and street lighting project through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. We have before us an ordinance that will allow Portland Bureau of Transportation to temporarily use certain pieces of private property as they construct important crossings and safety improvements for multiple Safe Routes to School projects this construction season. These are highly supported improvements to the community, and the vast majority of projects this season are in underserved parts of the city, most east of 82nd. Property owners have been notified of these temporary needs and council action today. Marty Maloney is here from PBAT to quickly explain what's needed and answer any questions the council may have. Marty?
Morning, Mayor and Commissioners. At this point, I'll have David Backus, the project manager, kind of give you a brief overview of the project, and then I'll follow up on the right-of-way specific needs for the project.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Is my screen share working over here?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and I've been kicked out of the Zoom a couple times already. Hopefully I'll stay around. If not, you'll be in great hands with Marty. So I'm the PBOT project manager for the Safe Routes to School Signals and Street Lighting project. And I'll keep this pretty quick, starting here with a map showing where the improvements are. So we have 5 traffic signals for pedestrians to cross streets, MLK and Going, 16th and Burnside, 86th and Washington, 113th and Gleason, 148th and Main. And also part of this project is street lighting infill on Gleason from 82nd to 162nd. So a big stretch of Gleason there. And some quick notes on background. It's kind of a bundle of 6 capital projects, all with their own construction funding streams. So we're paying for this through fixing our streets, cannabis tax, system development charges, and a couple other smaller pots of money. And the 5 traffic signals included in this project bundle and the street lighting infill were identified as priority Safe Routes to School projects during the big outreach effort in 2017. So we're just kind of checking projects off the list that the community has wanted for some years now. And a couple other notes on the street lighting specifically. So our high crash network streets are in some of our most diverse neighborhoods in Portland, and they lack adequate street lighting. And further public engagement work and surveys with the community found that Portlanders of color especially feel less safe walking on poorly lit streets. So these are really important projects for our diverse community here in Portland. So goals and scope, Like I said, these are 5 traffic signals, but I did a quick count and they're actually benefiting at least 11 schools. The way that the signals are placed, you know, there are multiple schools in some areas. So it's great to be able to serve multiple locations with a single traffic signal that, you know, a pedestrian can go up, hit the button, traffic stops, cross the street, instead of today where you have to do a little bit more of a risky crossing in some of the areas. And then on Gleason, we're adding 150 new streetlights. Many of them are replacing older dimmer lights, but we're also adding, it's a net increase overall of traffic lights. And what we're doing is providing more uniform lighting to illuminate both sides of the street and to reduce the kind of bright spots and then dark spots along the corridors, so that pedestrians, people biking and driving, everybody is going to be better illuminated with the new lighting. And we're doing extra lighting also at the crossings, mid-block and intersection crossings. So people waiting to cross the street will be better lit also. And I'll turn that over to Marty for right-of-way here. Marty, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Mayor and Commissioners, my name is Marty Maloney, PBOT right-of-way. So agenda item 312 gives PBOT authority to compensate affected property owners for needed temporary easements, and if necessary, to condemn for these property rights associated with the Safe Routes to School signals and street lighting project. 4 temporary easements have been identified and are necessary to support construction of project improvements. These temporary easements will allow certain ADA and sidewalk facilities to be constructed within the project corridor. All affected property owners have been informed of the project need for these property rights and were invited to attend the reading. And that really concludes the presentation. If council has any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, David and Marty. That was a great presentation. I was tracking the PBOT's Vision Zero campaign, and I'm wondering if there was, if that inspired some of this action, looking at that data to get better results.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Our Vision Zero work is driving many of our capital projects. So it's a good example on Gleason, the street lighting infill, where we have a higher proportion of pedestrian injuries on that type of street. I don't believe all of the signals are on high crash streets as part of this bundle, but we do have some overlap with some of the signals, some of those locations.
Thank you, David. You were breaking up just a little. That was partly why I smiled, because I was missing a few of the words. But I just hope that we continue to connect the dots between this type of action and with how we want to move the needle. And I'm really, my lived experience of going to many, many meetings out in that area at 7:30 a.m., especially in the winter, it's so needed for the school children to have better crossings. So it seems like it's targeted very well to improve the metrics on the Vision Zero campaign. So I just wanted to amplify that at this time for the record. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Seeing no questions, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one is on the call for this item.
All right, very good. This is an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
I want to take a moment to really appreciate PBOT staff and prioritizing these areas where people are dying on our streets due to a lack of lighting, transportation infrastructure, and automobiles going too darn fast. We are taking a multi-pronged approach, and what we're voting on today actually helps us continue to live up to the promises made by Vision Zero. And I just want to say thank you, I vote aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Rubio,
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you very much for a good presentation. Item 313, a second reading, please.
Assess benefited properties for street, sidewalk, and stormwater improvements in the Northeast 27th Avenue and Holland Street Local Improvement District.
Colleagues, this is a second reading. We've heard a presentation and there's been opportunity for public testimony. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Sorry, aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you, Andrew. 314, please, also a second reading.
Vacate portions of Northeast 27th Avenue and Northeast Holland Street south of Northeast Columbia Boulevard, subject to certain conditions and reservations.
Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Thank you, Peabody and McInnes Investments, for working together to have this be a reciprocal agreement. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. 315.
Authorize intergovernmental agreement with Portland State University Homelessness and Research Action Collaborative for program evaluation of Portland street response in the amount of $213,426.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn it over to my totally able staff person, Kristen Johnson, to lead this agenda item. Kristen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Kristen Johnson, and I'm Commissioner Hardesty's Financial Policy Advisor, and I've been working on Portland Street Response since 2019. Today, I come before you to present an intergovernmental agreement between Portland Fire and Rescue and the Portland State University Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative, the amount of $213,426 for evaluation services of Portland Street Response. In February of this year, Portland Street Response started taking 911 calls in the Lens neighborhood, and a second team will be starting this August. Program evaluation will be integral to ensuring that the program is both successful and transparent to our community. PSU's Homelessness and Research Action Collaborative was one instrumental group in our original stakeholder process in 2019. At that time, they participated in the community engagement work group alongside other community members and groups to conduct in-person surveys with individuals from our houseless community. Collectively, this work culminated in a report created by PSU called Believe Our Stories and Listen, and helped ensure that the houseless community was centered in the creation of the Portland Street Response pilot. Now, Portland Fire and Rescue would like to establish a partnership with the Homelessness and Research Action Collaborative for program evaluation. The work plan of this agreement before you today is robust and includes the following: finalizing metrics and markers of program success, creating data collection tools and gathering protocols, collaboration between PSU and the Street Roots Ambassador Program to conduct 2 to 4 rounds of surveys of unhoused individuals, ongoing collection of information from Portland Street Response staff about how the program is operating, including lessons learned from their experiences in the field and additional resources or support they may need to do their jobs effectively. Participation in weekly Portland Street Response check-in meetings, quarterly focus groups and/or individual interviews with Portland Street Response staff, quarterly administration of the professional quality of life scale to gauge job satisfaction, support, and compassion fatigue within the Portland Street Response staff and other fire staff, interviews with fire staff at Station 11 and police staff at East Precinct to assess their experiences with the program, surveys, interviews, and/or focus groups with several organizations such as businesses, neighborhood associations, and service providers to gain feedback about their experiences with the program, tracking and analysis of social media and web content about Portland Street Response to better understand the community members' experiences with and general attitudes towards the program, targeted surveys and interviews in areas with the highest volume of calls responded to by Portland Street Response, and provision of regular updates to partners of the Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative's data analysis as applied through an equity lens and with performance reports. And so this agreement also includes 2 reports that will come to council. The first one will come after 6 months later this fall, and a second report will come after 12 months next spring. The agreement total of $213,426 is for both the base funding of this agreement to cover the scope of work I just mentioned at $170,741. It is also inclusive of a 25% project contingency totaling $42,685 in case there is a need to add to the current scope of work. So that's what I have today to present about the agreement, and Dr. Greg Townley, the lead researcher on this project from the Homelessness and Research Action Collaborative, is also with us today, should there be any questions that you'd like us to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Any question, Commissioner Maps?
Yes, I have a couple of questions for Professor Townley, if I may. Professor Townley, so you're kind of the lead investigator on this, I take it? Is that how I should think about this?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll be leading the evaluation. And I'm the director of research for the Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative, and also an associate professor of community psychology.
Great. I appreciated Kristen's overview, but I also like to hear from you a little bit about what your research design for this evaluation is going to be.
Sure. And if I could just say, and Kristen, thanks for that introduction. It was an excellent overview of the scope of work. And I want to say to Mayor Wheeler and commissioners, really appreciate the opportunity. The Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative is honored to be involved in this work. This is such an innovative program that our community critically needs and wants. And we, as the Portland Street Response team, have been meeting nationally with other cities that are developing these programs. And there are 2 things that we keep hearing, 2 common themes. First, we have to lead with community when we're designing the programs. And as Kristen reviewed, we did this with Commissioner Hardesty's listening sessions, with the surveys we did with Street Routes to really inform the pilot program to make sure that it was designed in the way the community wants and needs. And the evaluation followed suit with that, which is the other area that we really hear from cities, that we don't know how these programs work. We need more data. And our evaluation is the largest and most comprehensive and most community-centered evaluation of this type of program that's been conducted. So not only can we lead the way with our program, the Portland Street Response, that other cities will want to adopt and implement, we can also lead the way in how we're analyzing and documenting the effects of the program. With that in mind, it leads to how this work came about, which is really very closely connected to community needs and interests. We did extensive outreach to a wide variety of stakeholders in designing the evaluation. We thought carefully and critically about how the evaluation should best be conducted. And given that this is a new innovative program, it really requires a case study model of evaluation. I want to make sure that Commissioner Maps, and Commissioner Maps, I'm happy to repeat any of this that you may have missed, but just going over that this type of work, given the innovative model, really requires a case study style of evaluation. And so we're really focusing closely on the Lintz neighborhood and surrounding areas to really do a deep dive, understanding how it's serving that community, how it's serving unhoused people, people with behavioral health crisis who are using the program, and really doing a wide scope. This will allow us to know that in an area like Lintz that has a lot of challenges and opportunities, if we can really closely investigate and examine, again, using that case study model, we really know intimately how it's working there. We have high confidence that when we scale up citywide, it will also work in other areas, but we also want to do ongoing evaluation as well. Let me pause there and see if there are targeted questions from that, but that is a general overview of both the inspiration behind the evaluation design and then also how it will operate.
Commissioner Maps, yeah, what questions are you trying to answer?
Trying to answer for whom does the program work and how. Trying to answer, let me pull up my notes here. We've really been informed by a variety of outcome goals. We want to see reduction in the number of calls that police respond to where no crime is being committed. Reduction in the number of people who are transported to the emergency room for less severe medical related issues that could be addressed in community settings. Reduction in the number of behavioral health and less severe medical calls traditionally responded to by police and fire. And importantly, also how the community is serving, how the program is serving community, both how community members are satisfied and feel supported by the program, and most importantly, people who are most impacted by the program, how they're being served, and what are their levels of satisfaction with that. So those are 5 core questions, but within that, we also have a lot of other data points that we're closely tracking around call volume, response time. What are the services that people are being provided? Where are the gaps? I think that's a critically important question. Or what are the gaps in our city's system of care that mean that when there's a response, we're not able to provide direct housing for the client, or we're not able to provide direct services? That is critical information to know how we can best fill those gaps as the program scales up.
How much data do you need to evaluate these programs?
Lots of data, which we're collecting. I really think because the program is so new and because it is such an innovation, we really have to be doing wide outreach to, again, a variety of stakeholders to know, because there's no ability to say that like only a subsection of the population is going to be interviewed. We really need to know, given the diversity of people served here, the diversity of our community, we really have to do outreach that is inclusive of all those voices. And it's both programmatic data, so ongoing analysis of day-to-day, hour-to-hour, how's the program working, what are the data we're getting from the program, but also ongoing responsive outreach to community members, which is why we've directly coordinated with the Street Roots Ambassador Program and talked with them, how many surveys do we need to do? When we originally did the survey of unhoused people to inform the program, we interviewed around 180 people. And so we decided that in order to know how this program is working in an ongoing capacity, we originally thought of doing 2 rounds of that. We took it to community who said that's not enough. You're going to be developing relationships with people. We need to interview people 2, 3, 4 times so that over the course of the program, while our initial expectation is that people might not have had interactions with Portland Street Response when we interviewed them the first time. They may have heard of it though. Then the second, the third time, as we get the word out, as the ambassadors go and do outreach, more people will have had experience with the program, will be able to provide additional data. So we can't just interview them once or even twice. It really has to be ongoing, close relationships. Same with businesses, same with residents. The community is so interested in this program. They need an opportunity to talk to an independent entity like ourselves about how it's working. And we really value community voice. We're very community-centered and participatory, which really requires ongoing immersive evaluation, not just wait until the program's done and then study the numbers and that's that.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. And just one last question, and I'll let Commissioner Ryan take over the mic. I think as of Monday, Portland Street Response has gone out on 100 calls. Do you feel like that's enough data to say something that you would have some statistical confidence in?
So I would hesitate. I don't want to make any statements about programmatic data without being able to triangulate it with multiple sources. So now I would say that the calls we're at now, we can't make any definitive conclusions. We shouldn't. It would be problematic to do so. But in the coming months, and certainly as we gear up to the 6-month report, I absolutely expect that we'll be able to make recommendations based on the data that we do have confidence in.
Do you have a sense of how many calls you would need to go out on before you have some confidence in your conclusions? Or how many calls they'd have to go out and respond to before you'd have confidence in your conclusions?
Yeah, not exactly, but I can point to some similar studies. So in Denver with their STAR program, they issued their first report, which was reflective of, I believe, 500 to 600 calls. And they were able to see with that they had shifted around 2 to 3%, diverted 2 to 3% of calls from police. And so, you know, again, I can't, our program is different. Our program is different from Cahoots, it's different from STAR. And so I hesitate to name a number, but I will point to that recent report as one that they went on 500 calls and found that that was a number that they felt confident in making statistically significant conclusions around.
Thank you, Professor Townley.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you. First of all, Kristen, thank you for that introduction. It was a great introduction to this topic, and it's great to meet you, Professor Townley. And I just have some bigger picture questions. I could be on the verge of these questions could be maybe asking us to go deeper with our scope. I don't know, but I just, it's important to get these out into the record. My motivation to be on this council is really to get to the bottom of the houselessness crisis, the deep roots, the causation around our mental health system is something that is embarrassing for the state of Oregon. Earlier it was reported that we're 51st when you add Washington, D.C. in terms of a system. And so my question is, when you do this evaluation, will you go beyond, we have dispatcher and then we have the first responders. Then it's what's always been on my mind, and you've heard me maybe say this, others have, that I always wonder, where are we going to take people? And so my question is, when we evaluate the street response system, how it intersects and complements the rest of the healthcare system. So will we be engaging with hospitals, with county services, and other nonprofits providing similar services or complementing our services? Just trying to get to the scope of it.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Right now, what's built into the scope of work is absolutely doing outreach in the neighborhood where the pilot has been launched to service providers. I think we can think about expanding that. The way that we are really capturing those data currently are through the community health workers that are part of the pilot program. They're working with clients after there's the response. They do the intensive follow-up with getting people. We've already had someone successful in getting into housing and getting an ID. And so we're tracking these accomplishments that really reflect both challenges in getting people into the services, the housing they need to, but also the accomplishments of that. And they're staying in close contact with these clients. They're also introducing us to them and asking if they'd be willing to speak with us so we can learn more about their experience and able to actually follow them over time to see, do they stay in that housing? Do they engage in the services that the community health worker has helped put them on the road to engaging in? And so that'll really help both from the people who are directly impacted by the program, and then we can also utilize snowball sampling and say, can we talk to your case manager about the success you've had in first starting with Portland Street Response, then getting engaged in housing or services, and do an interview with them. And given that we have contingency funds, if we do need to use some of those for more immersive interviews with systems of care, you mentioned hospitals, other service providers, I absolutely think that's within the scope of work that we would absolutely be happy to do. And that's also important for recognizing where the gaps are and how this program is intersecting with those.
Thank you.
Commissioner, if I may, we're also tracking if there's a situation where we're not able to bring a person somewhere or connect them with a service, we're tracking barriers to, we all sort of intuit, and we've heard from service providers that there's not enough stuff out there to help people. But we're going to be tracking those barriers or that lack of service provision or things so that we can kind of quantify that a little better too. We've also sort of hoped that Portland Street Response would help shine a light on what people have been telling us over and over, and we would be able to add some data to that.
And I appreciate that, Kristen. When I looked at the key performance measures, which were lovely in terms of having both quantitative, qualitative, and now I'm hearing more about longitudinal from the professor, but I couldn't see if we were interacting with the emergency units. I just happen to have in my social network an inordinate amount of emergency room nurse friends. And this is something for the last at least 5 years that's really been on the top of their mind. And especially the last couple of years, just it's difficult to keep people in those jobs because they're experiencing a lot of trauma from what the intake is in the emergency rooms in our area. So just as an example that we don't have the system, because that's not the place where we want to take people, but that's where people are going. So I couldn't tell from looking at the scope if in fact we were going to be interviewing emergency rooms in the area and in our hospitals. So I'm happy to hear that you're open to that, and maybe it just didn't get into the detail of what I'm looking at right now. So that's why I want to have this dialogue.
Yes, and if I may respond, Commissioner?
Yes, please.
In doing some review of where comparable programs have kind of landed in transport to AMR or through AMR to the emergency room, for example, I was looking at our programmatic data, and so far 3 people have been transported to emergency room through AMR. Other programs that are ones that typically co-respond with police or that use like a crisis intervention treatment model, they actually report closer to like 30% of transport. So our numbers there are pretty low so far, which I think is a good thing, meaning we're helping people in the field, and we know that it's very costly and can be traumatizing for people to have to use those intensive services when they may not need them to. And so again, I hesitate, I don't want that stated as like early finding of the program, but I do think I want to list that as an example of how we're tracking that, and that we're able to also assign a dollar value to what an emergency room visit costs and determine if our program is actually, reducing costs to the system of care. But again, I want to do a lot more analysis of that, but to give you a little bit of a way of how we're looking at our data in comparison to similar programs and what they found.
Well, this is obviously a complex problem. It will take a lot of complex solutions, but I find sometimes we don't spend enough time on the front end having dialogue like this to make sure that we're covering the extensiveness of this complexity. I'll just end with a comment that I hope you'll find helpful. I worked hard on introducing a group called Community Solutions to the Joint Office. They're known nationally for their work on data collection on houselessness community, and they're now working with the Joint Office. So I think the intersection and the data fields that you'll be able to get from the Joint Office will keep improving, hopefully.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Greg and Kristen, for that presentation. Kristen, I just wanted you to talk about how we're looking for financial support for Portland Street Response and the avenues that we're exploring.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'm keeping track of legislation and shout out to our awesome, helpful friends in the Office of Government Relations, keeping track of federal legislation like the Cahoots bill and some state legislation with Representative Sanchez and others. We know that there are both federal and state movements to bring programs like Cahoots and those that work for their communities up around not only the state of Oregon, but around the country. And so we are very optimistic that as we unfold Portland Street Response, after what we believe is a critical initial investment by the city, we will be able to bill for Medicaid. We will be able to apply for state grants. And as we build out a more robust medical side to Portland Street Response, as we're doing incrementally through the pilot already, we might be able to partner with some community care organizations because we do believe that we will be instrumental in helping people get the treatment they need in the field. That is, not necessary to go to the emergency department, but we know that people do because that's the only place they can be seen. So we are quite confident that we will find revenue sources from these other places in the future.
Thank you. That's excellent. I have a question for the professor. So I think what you'll find is this council is uniformly supportive of the concept that we're currently testing in the pilot program. We all agree that the police are being sent to interventions that they should not be sent to. Many of us went down and we evaluated the Cahoots model. We were impressed with it enough that we decided to put together this pilot and evaluate it. My question is one about whether we are testing alternatives to the model that we currently have in place. And you mentioned, Professor, that this is different than the Cahoots model. We've chosen a different delivery mechanism. And my question is, if we're really testing this, shouldn't we have more than one delivery model that we're comparing it to? Like, what if we compared it to the Cahoots model or established as part of an expanded pilot program, an alternative model that's more similar to Cahoots rather than what we've chosen? Because otherwise, aren't we just limited to a binary choice that either yes, it works or no, it doesn't work?
Thanks, Mayor Wheeler, for the question. And it's a really good one. It's one that we've thought about a lot. And I think, again, that we will absolutely be tracking benchmarks that are set by programs like Cahoots and like the STAR program. Our evaluation goes so much deeper and farther beyond what they've done that in some ways we are working with entirely new data, and we will become the benchmarks for other programs to compare against. And I think it's really important with where the program's at and with how much we still need to learn about our program and the adaptations that need to be made to make our program successful. It would be kind of an unfair comparison at this point to compare it with programs that have existed for decades like Cahoots, This case study model will mean that we can take a program and innovation from pre-existing programs that we really need to allow the time to incubate and the time to study and carefully review performance metrics, do surveys with communities. And once we know that, once we know about our program, I think down the road, again, we need to keep evaluating this thing. I think we have high levels of confidence that it's going to be successful. I think there'll be future opportunities to, once our program is fully up and running and operating citywide, we can absolutely then say, let's compare it to Cahoots, let's compare it to STAR, let's compare it to other models. But we're too early in that. We need to allow our program to breathe and grow in a small, contained context. And case study evaluation is absolutely the way to do that, as opposed to an RCT, a randomized control trial, which is the gold standard. But we would be vastly premature in suggesting that that's how the evaluation could operate at this early stage.
Very good. And would you agree that we should see this pilot program through and make sure that we are doing the work up front before we, the debate right now is whether we basically move beyond the pilot program. We've now been in the field for 2 months and a couple of days. And the question is, do we rapidly expand this to a citywide model? And I think that's a conversation the council will have later. But should we choose to do that, my concern is we are making a choice to institutionalize what we've got right now before we really have it evaluated. And so I'm hoping, and I'm really not sure how to do it, so I'll just leave it to your good insights and your team to figure out how do we on one hand acknowledge what you just said, that we all agree that some type of street response is desirable and it's urgently needed. On the other hand, we don't want to institutionalize the wrong model and find that we've cemented something that really wasn't either the most cost effective or from a service delivery perspective necessarily the best mix of services in the field. And I'm hoping there's something you can do as part of this study to stew over that a bit and think about it and help this council rationalize that real tension between those two interests.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've always appreciated the fact that Commissioner Hardesty and others have been supportive of the program being given the time it needs to grow, which is the 1-year pilot, which I'm absolutely in agreement with that we need to do. With that said, I think it's always been the case that the evaluation is not, will the program work? We have high confidence that it'll work. It's what we need to do to refine and to adapt and to tailor it to meet the needs of this community and be able to have it scaled up citywide. That's always been the ultimate goal, and the way that we've been framing the evaluation, that at the end of the year, we are confident that it will be able to be scaled up, and the 6-month report will be extremely illuminative to that and to giving us the data we need to have confidence that it's ready to go and that we have time then to continue scaling up. But yes, it needs time to grow. I think that that's intimately important to have the 1-year pilot, but I do think that we are being positioned to be able to have it launch citywide on schedule as we planned.
What could I expect, just so I don't get my hopes up too high or aim too low? What do we expect to know at the 6-month period? That's my last question. Can you give us some sense of what you think we'll hear?
Sure.
Just in terms of what level of confidence can we have in 6 months? Will we be largely confident or somewhat confident? Where do we think we'll be?
Yes, we believe that we'll be largely confident about the numbers of calls we're going on, the types of calls, the ability to transport people to other services, where the gaps are, how community feels about the program, what community has recommended we do to refine the program, the numbers of teams we would need to have to match the numbers that we're serving in a small area of the city. And so I think, again, we'll have a lot more to learn as we bring on a second team and as we can continue to consider staffing composition, staffing structures, time of day that people are working. We'll still have work to do, but we'll have time to get there with the initial data that we'll have available at that 6-month part.
I'm really excited about this, and I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty and her office for bringing this engagement forward. I think this is the way to go, and I really appreciate your interest and your obvious enthusiasm for this project. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure and an honor.
If there are no other questions, do we have public testimony on this item?
No one is on the call for this item.
All right, this is an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for all your work. Thank you very much, Greg. And for my newer colleagues, Greg has been with us from the beginning, even when we were planning on what it could possibly be. I've been so grateful for this partnership with Portland State University, and it has served us well up until this point, and it will continue to do so, I know. I am happy to vote aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Thank you, Kristen and Dr. Townley, and also the staff at PSR for all their thoughtful work on this project. Really glad to hear more about how this partnership will further inform the direction of the project, and I look forward to hearing updates and progress. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
Happy to support. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Commissioner Hardesty, the only item left, and I have a thought on it. It's the fire truck one. Would it be of material concern if we delayed that for 1 week and then I will get all of my questions answered?
Not at all, Mayor. And in fact, I was going to recommend I take it back to my office and make sure that I circle the quote unquote building to see if there are any additional questions that we can be answered.
Yeah, even next week, I think would be fine. I just need a little more time, and I'm grateful that you're willing to give me a little more space on that.
Absolutely.
You're pulling that back to your office, and we'll reschedule that for next week, Keelan.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Awesome. Okay, then with that, we have completed our agenda for this morning. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.
A great service, and he's good at it. And so I don't blame him for taking advantage of them. I do blame them for not enforcing their rules. And in this case, allowing anyone to do anything just isn't tenable in this world, even a world leader. The fact that we act like we're confused about what happened here, he violated the rules on multiple occasions for years before, and then he finally took it a step too far. He took it a step too far well before this, but this one was such a clear-cut case. It's hard to argue that he should be allowed to be using these platforms, even if he's the president of the United States.
I raised the famous quote with Alan Rusbridger that Mark Zuckerberg came out with about how he does not want to be the arbiter of truth. Do you think that is tenable still?
No, it's ridiculous. You don't build a service that requires an arbiter of truth if you don't want to be the arbiter of truth. I think the issue is down to the fact that it's such a big and impossibly